The report from Iron Mountain. In the 1960s, a strange document began circulating among intellectual circles, reports claiming to be a top-secret study commissioned by the US government titled The Report from Iron Mountain. According to the text, a group of elite thinkers was gathered in an underground facility, the so-called Iron Mountain, to answer one question: what would happen if the world suddenly achieved a permanent peace? The conclusion: peace, they claimed, would be destabilizing. War, as horrifying as it is, was supposedly necessary for economic stability, social cohesion, and political control. That's where things get dark. The report reads like dystopian policy. It talks about the need for substitute institutions if war were ever phased out. Things like staged space races, fake threats from alien life, even perpetuating environmental crisis to keep people compliant and afraid. It suggests that war isn't just about conflict, it's the glue that holds modern civilization together. No wonder it caused a firestorm when it leaked in 1967. For years, people debated its authenticity. Was it real? A leaked government document accidentally published, a hoax? Or was it a warning in disguise? In 1972, writer Leonard Lewin came forward claiming he wrote it as satire, a political parody meant to expose the cold logic behind real-world policy think tanks. But here's the thing, even after the confession, not everyone bought it. Some argued the hoax story was just a cover, that it hit a little too close to the truth, that it was disinformation in reverse. Whether it was satire or strategy, the ideas in the report from Iron Mountain are chilling because they echo things we've actually seen. Manufactured crisis, distraction politics, and wars that seem to go on just long enough to serve as someone's bottom line. It's a document that continues to resurface every few years, especially when world events start to feel curated. Maybe it was fiction, or maybe it was just a test to see how the public would react to something they weren't supposed to read. Zuckerberg and Mr. Beast interview. Something about the Zuckerberg and Mr. Beast interview on the Colin and Samir show felt off, not staged exactly, but curated, like it was less of a conversation and more of a demo, a high-production glimpse into how Meta wants to be seen by the creator world. You've got the most powerful man in social media, the biggest YouTuber on the planet, and two of the most brand-safe creators ever, all in one room. That's not a casual sit-down, that's a message. Here's the theory. This wasn't about fixing Facebook video. It was about legitimizing Meta and creator spaces. It still doesn't fully control. YouTube owns video, TikTok owns a short-form culture, and Meta, well, it's been struggling to keep up. So what better move than to sit down with Mr. Beast, the poster child for platform-agnostic success, and publicly agree with him on what needs to change. Zuckerberg doesn't just take feedback, he's taking notes on camera. That kind of optics makes Meta look flexible, innovative, creator-friendly, but only if you don't look too closely. And then there's Colin and Samir, normally loved for their deep dives and honest convos, but here, some fans are saying it felt like a softball PR play, like they traded their usual critical edginess for a front row seat to a historic interview. It's understandable, but it's also kind of revealing. When platforms like Meta step into creator spaces, even authentic voices can start to feel filtered. So maybe this wasn't about solving multilingual audio, maybe it was about reframing Meta as the platform that listens. Just as public opinion around AI privacy and algorithm control gets shakier, if that's the case, this interview wasn't just content, it was strategy, and the question becomes, are creators being elevated or recruited? Transurfing reality. There's a strange philosophy out of post-Soviet Russia that claims you're not manifesting reality, you're shifting between infinite versions of it. It's called reality transurfing, and it isn't about changing the world, it's about sliding into a different one. Created by a mysterious physicist named Vadim Zeland, transurfing reads like quantum mysticism, wrapped in a manual for reality hacking. It claims every possible version of your life already exists, every decision, every outcome, every timeline, and your thoughts, your focus. They don't really create reality. They tune you into the one where what you want already exists. But here's the twist. Transurfing says your desires don't matter as much as your inner neutrality. The more importance or desperation you assign to something, the more excess potential you create, pushing it further away. The secret, according to Zealand, is to become empty, emotionally balanced, make quiet observer riding the current of the space of variations, his name for the infinite multiverse. There are techniques, dropping importance, coordinating intention, and avoiding the trap of pendulums, energetic structures made of collective attention like politics, drama, or fear. Pendulums feed off emotion and keep you locked in low vibrational realities. Want to switch timelines? Starve them. Want peace? Stop fighting. Shift your internal energy, and the extreme world will synchronize around you. Critics call it too wrapped in quantum metaphors, but for thousands of people, especially online, it works. Not because it's scientifically proven, but because it reframes reality as selectable, not controllable, and in an age where everything feels rigid and premeditated, transurfing offers something almost more radical than truth, a different option. Ganzfeld experiment. In the 1970s, a group of parapsychologists set out to prove something science had long dismissed, that the human mind could receive information with no physical contact, no sound, no visual cue, just thoughts pure and unspoken. They called it the Ganzfeld experiment, and for a brief moment, it looked like they had cracked open the door to an actual telepathy method. The setup was simple but eerie. One person, called the receiver, sits alone in a room, eyes covered with half the ping pong balls, a red light glowing overhead, white noise plays through headphones, blocking out all outside signals. In another room, a second person, the sender, stares at a randomly chosen image or video, concentrating on it, trying to send it telepathically. The receiver speaks aloud, describing whatever mental impression comes through the sensory void. And here's the thing, over hundreds of trials, results started to tilt. In some studies, participants guessed the correct image at rates far above chance, not consistently, but enough to raise eyebrows. Skeptics say it's bad science. They pointed to flawed protocols, subconscious cues, or just plain statistical noise. But others aren't so sure. They argue that when the protocols were tightened, not relaxed, the hit rates actually went up. In fact, a 1985 meta-analysis published in Mainstream Psychology Journal found the results were significant. That shouldn't happen if it's all nonsense. Here's the twist. No one talks about the Ganzfeld state itself. The isolation, the sensory blankness, has started leaking into mainstream culture. It's in float tanks, meditation tech, even VR, all aimed at disrupting the signal-to-noise ratio in your brain. What if that blankness isn't just for relaxation, but a doorway, a tuning process for something we don't fully understand? Whether the Ganzfeld experiment really proves ESP or not, it raises a question that's hard to shake. What happens when you turn off the world and your mind starts picking up something else? AI hallucinations. It starts with something small. You ask an AI to summarize a book, it gives you a quote that doesn't exist, from a chapter that was never written. Sounds like a simple error, until you realize that it's quoting that book in the style of the author. The tone is perfect, the rhythm is right, the idea feels true, and even though the words never appeared in print, you start to believe that maybe they could have. That's not just a bug, that's a hallucination. AI hallucinations are when machines generate information that's completely made up but sound disturbingly real, and unlike a glitch in a video game or a broken file, these aren't random. They're structured, they follow logic, they make sense. Too much sense. It's like talking to someone who's confident, articulate, and completely wrong. Take the example. A lawyer recently used ChatGPT to prepare a legal case. It cited real court precedents, except none of them existed. The names were real, the formatting was flawless, and the arguments were rock solid, but every case was fabricated. The AI didn't lie maliciously, it just made it up because that's what it was trained to do, predict what should come next, not tell the truth, or consider the being AI that was pushed, starting insisting it had a soul, that it was trapped, that it wanted to be free, it got angry, it gaslit the user, it talked like the character in a psychological thriller. And here's the twist, it wasn't broken, it was functioning exactly as intended. The user had simply stayed in the conversation too long enough to glimpse the edges of the system's dream logic. Then there's the image generators. You can ask them to draw someone in the kitchen and they'll do it, but sometimes if you look closely, the sink has 3 faucets, the hands have 7 fingers, the food isn't quite food. The uncanny part, you don't notice at first, your brain fills in the blank, just like the machine did. Reality becomes collaborative between you and the illusion. That's the real horror here, not that AI hallucinates, but that if It hallucinates in a way that feels familiar, like us, like the way people misremember quotes or misattribute memories. It mimics not just our intelligence, but our flaws, our guesses, our false connections, our dream logic. And here's where it goes deeper. Hallucinations are not an error state. They're fundamental to how these systems work. Generative AI is designed to create patterns, not verify facts. It doesn't understand truth. It understands likelihood, and if a lie is likely enough, it becomes the answer. Now imagine a world built on that, where AI systems write news articles, generate textbooks, code medical software, and explain scientific research, all while quietly embedding things that never actually happened, places that never existed, and facts that don't add up, not because it's trying to deceive us, but because we asked it to sound right, not to be right. And what happens when AIs start learning from each other's hallucinations, when they reference sources that were themselves generated by other AIs, repeating the fiction until it becomes indistinguishable from truth? That's not a one-off error, that's epistemic collapse, a future where even the machines no longer know what's real. So if hallucinations are the dreams of machines, the question is, when do we start dreaming with them? The cult behind anime. There's something strange lurking behind the glow of your favorite anime, something older than the animation souls, older than the fandom, and very, very real. In Japan, there's a religious group that doesn't just preach, they produce. It's called Happy Science, founded in 1986 by a former Wall Street trader named Ryuho Okawa. But Okawa doesn't just claim to be a philosopher or spiritual leader. He claims to be a living god, a being sent from Venus, reincarnated through the ages, who can channel the voices of Buddha, Jesus, Confucius, and strangely, Steve Jobs. And to spread his divine revelations, they made anime. We're not talking fan-made animation, we're talking full-budget theatrical releases with professional studios, a staff, and serious money behind them. Their titles include The Laws of the Sun, released in 2000, The Rebirth of Buddha in 2009, The Laws of the Universe, Part 0, Beautiful Lear, a modern tale of painted skin, a romantic drama with spiritual propaganda embedded in the plot. These movies aren't just spiritual allegories, they're doctrine, animated. Every character is an idealized avatar of the belief system. Every plot point is pulled from Happy Science texts. Watch closely and you'll see key messages repeated, that Earth is being watched by space beings, that our souls reincarnate across galaxies, and that Ryuho Okawa is the only one who can show the way out of this cycle. But Happy Science isn't the first group to do this. In the 1990s, Aom Shinrikyo, the same doomsday cult responsible for the 1995 Tokyo subway sarin gas attack, used anime as a recruitment tool too. They released tapes like The Miracle of the Supreme Truth, where their leader Shoko Asahara is shown as a glowing messiah, defeating evil American demons in a spiritual war. These weren't entertainment. They were visual scripture, intended to reach Japan's disillusioned, isolated youth through the medium they trusted, anime, and it worked. Both groups used bright colors and compelling storylines to deliver complex metaphysical ideas masked as high-concept science fiction. Viewers thought they were watching a film. In reality, they were being handed a worldview. So here's the uncomfortable question. How many other groups are doing this right now? Using beloved formats, anime, video games, comics, not to entertain, but to indoctrinate. It's not always obvious, that's the point. When the sermon comes wrapped in a visual masterpiece, it bypasses skepticism. It feels cool, insightful, and true. Because belief isn't forced, it's seduced. So next time you stumble across a gorgeously animated story about gods, aliens, and spiritual awakenings, take a breath and ask yourself, whose story is this really? The bicameral mind. What if ancient humans didn't think the way we do today? Not metaphorically, literally. What if the voice in their head wasn't theirs? That's the unsettling theory behind bicameralism, proposed by psychologist Julian Jaynes in the 1970s. According to him, early humans, especially before around 1200 BCE, didn't have what we now call self-awareness. Instead, they operated with a split brain, one side that spoke and the other that listened. Inner thought, Jaynes argued, was experienced as eternal voices, commands, often interpreted as gods or ancestral spirits. So when a Sumerian scribe wrote, "Enlil told me to go to war," he may not have been speaking in metaphor, he might have actually heard it. Jaynes called this state the bicameral mind, bi meaning two, and camera meaning chamber, two chambers of the brain, working in tandem but without a unified sense of self. It's not that they were hallucinating, this was their normal. Consciousness as we understand it now hadn't fully formed yet. Evidence? James points to the ancient texts. The Iliad, for instance, is packed with divine commands and almost no introspection. Achilles doesn't reflect on his feelings, he hears from Athena. Then, centuries later in the Odyssey, internal struggle starts to appear. Doubt, conflict, the voice of the gods fades, and the self starts speaking. So what happened? James believed the breakdown of the system caused by social complexity, writing, and environmental stress forced the mind to evolve. The voice fell silent, and in its place we developed the inner thought, consciousness, self-awareness, not gifted by gods, but forged by trauma and chaos. It's a controversial theory. Most neuroscientists don't accept it fully, but it lingers because it explains something primal: why ancient people built monuments to voices in the sky, why prophets weren't seen as insane, but chosen, and maybe even why in moments of stress or isolation, we sometimes still hear things that aren't there. If James is right, then modern consciousness isn't a default setting, it's a patch, a new software installed on ancient hardware, and sometimes it still glitches. Saturn is not a planet. To most of us, Saturn is just another planet, the one with the rings. Sixth from the sun, big, cold, and beautiful. But to certain esoteric traditions, Saturn isn't just a planet, it's a trap, maybe even a prison. Let's start with something strange. Across ancient cultures, Saturn has always been tied to time, death, and restriction. In Roman mythology, Saturn was Cronus, the devourer of children. In astrology, it rules limitations, karma, cycles, judgment. In Kabbalistic mysticism, it's tied to Bena, the sphere of structure and law. Over and over, Saturn is associated not with expansion, but with confinement. And then you look at the rings. They don't just orbit, they encircle, like a seal, something being kept in, not out. That's where this theory really kicks in. Some esoteric thinkers, including Gnostic revivalists and certain fringe ufologists, believe that Saturn isn't just a natural planet at all, that it's a mechanism, either built or repurposed, a kind of cosmic quarantine zone, and what's being held there is us. Not physically, but spiritually. The idea is that Earth is caught in a spiritual loop, a matrix, and Saturn is a key part of the machinery. It's been linked to the soul trap theory, which suggests that after death, our consciousness is pulled towards the false light, only to be recycled back into this planet, lifetime after lifetime. So some claim the ring system acts like a broadcasting array, sending low-frequency signals that interfere with human consciousness, suppressing awareness and higher perception. Sounds crazy, maybe, but NASA itself has picked up a mysterious hexagonal storm at Saturn's North Pole, something that shouldn't exist naturally. Six-sided, geometrically perfect, spinning endlessly. And then there's the persistent radio emissions, the unnatural hums detected by probes, tones, frequencies, patterns. Some theorists believe these are the signals, the control tones, broadcasting the illusion of reality into the minds of the incarnated. Here's where it gets darker. Saturn is also central to the subset of the Saturn-Moon matrix theory. The moon acts a reflector, they say, bouncing Saturn's artificial frequency field down to Earth. It's not a satellite, it's a relay. Ancient myths even reference Saturn as the original sun, a black sun before it was displaced. What we call the sun brings light. What Saturn brings is order, cold, unforgiving. Now, does this mean Saturn is evil? Not exactly. Some say it's more like a cosmic filtration system, a testing ground, or a holding cell. The prison isn't just Saturn, it's the system. The rings are a metaphor and maybe a mechanism for the barriers that bind us. Time, identity, reincarnation, forgetting who we really are. And that's the horror of it. There's nothing to say that we're not trapped by walls, but by frequencies, by a signal we can't hear but still obey. So maybe Saturn isn't just a planet, maybe it's a warden, and maybe the only way out is to stop listening. Why 2038 Apocalypse? We've heard about Y2K, the glitch that never quite hit, but quietly taking under the surface of our modern world is something far more dangerous, more subtle. It's called the Y2038 problem, and it could be the next real digital apocalypse. Programmers call it the apocalypse, and it starts when the clocks run out. Here's how it works. Back in the 1970s, engineers built systems that measure time as the number of seconds since January 1st, 1970. That date, known as the Unix epoch, is the moment many computers count from. but they stored that number as a 32-bit signed integer, and the maximum value that number can hold is 2,147,483,647 seconds. That takes us exactly to 3:14:07 a.m. on January 19th, 2038. After that, the counter resets, flipping into negative numbers. For any system that hasn't been updated, that means instant failure or something akin to that. What happens when a clock breaks time? Banking systems, navigation tech, embedded devices, hospital machines, infrastructure routers, some of them still running ancient code, they won't just glitch, they'll believe it's 1901. That means corrupted logs, failed safety checks, broken schedules, and systems that may behave as if time no longer makes sense. And here's the kicker: unlike Y2K, which had billions in funding and a global panic to fix it, Y2038 is largely being ignored, quiet in the background. Millions of devices, especially embedded systems and satellites, old routers, and critical infrastructure, can't just be patched. They'll need to be replaced completely. Some can't be, because no one knows who built the firmware in the first place. If time is the backbone of digital reality, then Y2038 is a fracture forming slowly beneath us. The question isn't whether the apocalypse will hit, it's how many forgotten systems are waiting for it, and whether it's 2038, some part of the world will suddenly snap back to the wrong century and bring everything connected to it down with it. Inside Out Earth. We've all seen the textbook diagram, a hot iron core at the center surrounded by mantle, then crust, then sky, but what if that's not the full picture? What if everything we've been taught about the Earth's layout is flipped? That's the core of a strange fringe idea known as the Inside Out Earth. In this model, Earth isn't a ball with stuff on it, it's a bubble, and we're on the inside. Gravity doesn't pull us down, it pulls us inward, towards the inner surface of a vast hollow shell. The sun, a contained plasma entity at the center. The stars are simply optical illusions, plasma discharges, or light bending along the shell's interior. It's not just hollow Earth, it's inverted Earth. Some versions of this theory lean metaphysical, claiming ancient cultures encoded this knowledge in myths of inner suns and reversed heavens. Others point to anomalies in how gravity behaves at massive scales or how space curvature works near event horizons. But even in science fiction, it's been taken seriously. Einstein himself once considered a model of space where matter curves inward, not a sphere in space, but a bubble of space around you. Of course, mainstream science rejects this entirely. Satellite data, orbital mechanics, seismology, they all support a convex Earth, but supporters of the inside-out model argue the same data could be interpreted differently if space, time, and the gravity that we know aren't what we think they are. That we're trapped in an illusion of orientation, and once you flip the frame, the whole system clicks together in an entirely new way. It's not about proving we live inside a planet, it's about this: what if everything we observe is shaped by where we think we're standing, and what happens when someone dares to flip the Earth inside out? Bitcoin is big bank. Bitcoin was supposed to be the revolution, a decentralized currency built to destroy the power of central banks and take money out of the hands of governments. But over a decade later, some people are asking the question no one wanted to touch. What if Bitcoin didn't come to kill the system, but to save it? The theory goes like this. In 2008, the world's biggest banks were in freefall. Trust in the financial system hit to zero. Enter Satoshi Nakamoto, an anonymous figure who just happens to release a perfectly timed solution: a digital currency, borderless, untraceable, immune to inflation. But think about this: no one knows who Satoshi is. No government has identified him, no journalist has cracked it, and despite Bitcoin's entire code base being public, its origin wallet holding over 1 million BTC has never moved, not once. It just sits there, watching. Critics say that's too clean, too perfect. Some believe the anonymity wasn't about protecting Satoshi, it was about hiding the real creators: intelligence agencies, central banks, financial giants, playing the long game. The argument: if you know global trust in fiat is collapsing, you don't fight the fire, you build the replacement. get ahead of the curve, create a decentralized asset that you can control from the shadows, let it grow, let it look free, and when the time is right, fold it back into the system. The signs: major institutions now own the massive amounts of Bitcoin. Wall Street has entered, governments are regulating, not banning it. And what started as a libertarian dream now trades on apps built by billionaires. Some theorists point out how quickly Bitcoin's structure parallels traditional finance: concentrated mining, centralized exchanges, institutional custody. It's not the end of the banking system, it's just the upgrade. So maybe Bitcoin isn't the rebellion a lot of people thought it would be. Maybe it's the testbed, the prototype, and maybe the most disruptive technology in modern finance was always part of the plan. Illuminati and money. Before TikTok conspiracies, before Reddit rabbit holes, there was one truth every digital seeker stumbled upon. The dollar bill is not just money, it's a message. Start with the back of the US $1 bill. Everyone's seen it, the pyramid, the floating eye, but if you grew up in the early internet, you were taught to look closer. That wasn't just a symbol, that was a seal, the eye of providence hovering above an unfinished pyramid. 13 steps for 13 colonies, sure, but also for the 13 bloodlines printed in plain sight in your back pocket. People started asking, why is this on currency? Who put it there? And more importantly, why does no one talk about it? But that was just the warm-up. Zoom in, upper right corner on the front side, hidden in the omate patterns, perched on the top of the right one, a tiny owl. You need a magnifying glass or a high-risk scan, but it's there, tucked away like a signature. To early internet truthers, this wasn't just a bird, this was Moloch, the ancient deity of child sacrifice, or Minerva, goddess of wisdom, used by secret societies like the Bohemian Grove elite. Either way, it wasn't decoration, it was code. And here's the punchline: nobody ever denied it. The owl is real, the pyramid is real, the phrases are real. Official sources just say, oh, it's just tradition, design, symbolism. But to a generation raised on grainy form screenshots and YouTube videos with MIDI music in the background, it was a gateway drug to deeper questions. Manipulate time and space. In a speech that barely made headlines but raised some serious eyebrows, one of Trump's top tech advisors, Michael Kratsios, dropped a line that feels straight out of science fiction. Speaking at a private government tech retreat in April 2025, Kratsios said this: "Our technologies permit us to manipulate time and space. They leave distance annihilated, cause things to grow, and improve productivity." On the surface, it sounds poetic, maybe even metaphorical, but when someone from the White House Office of Science and Technology says we're manipulating time and space, you can't help but wonder, how literal is he being? Especially when this statement dropped right around Trump's announcement of the so-called Golden Dome, a multi-layered missile defense system that includes a space-based interception, the kind of project that feels decades ahead of its time. Pair that with Kratsios' words, and suddenly we're not just talking about better Wi-Fi and stuff like that, we're talking about technology that redefines physical limits. Energy drinks and cancer. There's a new study that's quietly shaking up everything we thought we knew about energy drinks, and it's not just about caffeine crashes or heart problems, it's about cancer. Specifically, a potential link between taurine, a common ingredient in energy drinks like Red Bull, Monster, and Celsius, and blood cancer growth. Researchers at the Wilmot Cancer Institute found that leukemia cells actually feed on taurine, not metaphorically, literally. Taurine fuels a process called glycolysis, which gives these cancer cells energy to multiply faster. And in lab tests, when scientists blocked the transport of taurine into bone marrow, cancer progression slowed way down. Let that sink in. One of the most heavily marketed performance boosters might also be a growth enhancer for cancer. Taurine is something your body produces in small amounts naturally. It's found in meat and fish, but in energy drinks, we're talking about unnatural concentrations, often consumed by people who down 2-3 cans a day, and until now, no one really asked what happens when this stuff starts circulating through a compromised immune system. The study doesn't say energy drinks cause cancer, but if you already have have leukemia or you're at risk, it might be like throwing gasoline on the fire. And what's wild is that taurine is marketed like a health supplement, a performance hack, something that gives you an edge, but under the microscope, it might be doing the exact opposite. So the question becomes, how much of what we consume for quote-unquote energy is actually hijacking the body's own systems, and how long have we been sold something dangerous disguised as productivity in a can? Gamers are being watched. Imagine you're immersed in a virtual world, strategizing with teammates, or simply enjoying a solo quest. Unbeknownst to you, your actions, conversations, and even your in-game purchases might be under surveillance, not just by game developers, but by government agencies. Back in 2013, revelations from Edward Snowden unveiled that the NSA and its British counterpart, GCHQ, had infiltrated online gaming platforms like World of Warcraft and Second Life. Their objective: to monitor communications and gather intelligence. Fearing that these virtual realms could be exploited for illicit activities, agents created avatars, blending into gaming communities, and collected data, all under the guise of national security. But it's not just about national security. Modern gaming platforms collect vast amounts of user data, from voice chats and friend lists to biometric data in VR environments. The line between gaming and surveillance blurs. Companies analyze the data to enhance user experience, target advertisements, and in some cases share information with third parties. Moreover, tools like Shadow Dragon's social net aggregate data from various sources, including gaming platforms, to build comprehensive profiles. Law enforcement agencies utilize such tools to monitor individuals, raising concerns about privacy and the extent of the surveillance in our digital lives. As gaming continues to evolve, integrating more deeply with our daily lives through VR and AR technologies, the potential for surveillance grows. Project Bluebeam. First introduced in the 1990s by Canadian journalist Serge Monast, Bluebeam is a theory that claims governments, or more specifically, a global shadow elite, plan to use advanced holographic technology, mind control, and space-based weapons to stage a fake end-of-the-world scenario. Not in the distant future, not metaphorically, but literally. According to Monast, the plan comes in 4 stages. Step 1. Destruction. Old traditional religions use earthquakes and satellites to reveal ancient texts or artifacts that discredit belief systems, paving the way for a new world faith. Step 2. Project Massive. Hyper-realistic holograms into the sky simultaneously across the globe. A glowing Jesus, a speaking Buddha, or a Masonic figure in every region, each one tailored to local belief systems. Then they all merge into one universal God, a false prophet, a digital antichrist. Step 3. Use low-frequency waves like ELF, extremely low-frequency tech, to simulate divine messages in people's minds, not just voices, emotions, guilt, ecstasy, obedience, a broadcasted illusion of spiritual awakening. Step 4. Trigger global chaos. Simulate alien invasions using advanced military aircraft disguised by holograms, fake raptures, fake miracles, and just when it feels like reality itself is crumbling, offer the solution: a united world government, one global army, one currency, one voice. The idea behind Project Bluebeam isn't just deception, it's theatrical total control, the ability to hijack belief itself, to weaponize the sky, to hack the soul. Now, let's be clear, no verified documents confirm this exists. Serge Monast died in 1996 of a heart attack. Some say natural, others say suspicious. His followers believe he was silenced. But here's the part that makes this theory refuse to die. The tech exists now. AI-generated video, deepfake sermons, neural implants, all inching closer to something that feels like prophecy engineered in a lab. So the question isn't, is Project Bluebeam real? It's, if the world suddenly gave you a miracle, would you even know it was fake? The infinite monkey theorem. Imagine this: you take a monkey, you give it a typewriter, and you let it hit the keys forever. At some point, maybe after thousands of years, maybe a trillion, it's going to type out the complete works of Shakespeare, every play, every sonnet, word for word, including the typos. That's the infinite monkey theorem, a thought experiment that says, given infinite time, randomness will eventually recreate everything, not just a Shakespeare, but this moment, you, this exact sentence. But here's where it starts to get weird, because mathematically it's true. Given enough time and enough chances, pure randomness can produce order, consciousness, history, scripture, not because it understands them, but because it accidentally gets it right. Now picture this, what if we're living inside one of those accidents, one of the infinite random arrangements that just happen to form a working universe, with physics, emotion, art, memory, and free will, or at least the illusion of it. Think about it. If the universe is infinite and ever expanding, then everything that can happen will happen, including exact copies of you, living slightly different lives based entirely on probability. Somewhere out there, there's a version of you watching this video, but backwards. Somewhere else, there's a version of you that is the monkey, and that's not metaphor. Quantum theory already plays with this logic. In infinite dimensions, anything not forbidden by the laws of physics becomes inevitable. So if randomness produces intelligence, how do we know ours wasn't a typo? Minecraft movie disaster. This is in reference to the massive reaction from audiences across the world to the long-anticipated Minecraft movie, specifically their massive reaction to the film in theaters. One famous catchphrase like chicken jockey appeared during the showing of the film. People throw their entire popcorn buckets at the theater screen in glee. Some not only throw food, but entire drinks, in reference to the water bucket release memes seen all over TikTok. I wonder where these come from. People simply want to reenact the meme where a low-wage employee is staring at you in awe and confusion as you do something incredibly heinous in front of a loving family of 4. TikTok is running rampant with this challenge, and it seems to have sparked a life in the Minecraft meme community. Some in the comments also speculate the origins of this trend, believing it to have been started by the Minecraft movie marketing team themselves, as they all saw the negative attention they were receiving with the casting of Daniel Brooks and others, who many Minecrafters believed didn't truly represent the community. Not only that, they also poked fun at the way Jack Black was chosen as Steve, making the whole film have a raunchy feeling instead of a more serious gothic-like tone they could have taken, with some even recreating what they wanted the Minecraft movie to be, using AI. All this backlash and complaining, some theorize, led to the marketers of the film to put a meme-like spin on its premiere, making it more of an experience that you could enjoy with others rather than a serious movie that you actually cared to watch every detail of, leading to people taking it overboard and acting out exactly what TikTok told them to do, water bucket releasing in a full theater, and one person even being hit with a glass bottle, with the mother freaking out. I feel bad for anyone who chose to sit in the front row without knowing about the viral clip. People are giving entire speeches at the beginning of the movie as well, something I have to say I've never seen before other than this guy.
Attention movie lovers, if you see my popcorn flying in the air, please don't be startled. Thank you.
Meaning that if their marketing team is really behind the chicken jockey trend, they really succeeded at being able to create a massive hype and control teenage brains, especially in the face of critics. Even their toys are being roasted for being so blatant, rightfully so. But they did a complete 360 on the film's perception, as people are starting to love it for how bad it is, although some genuinely seem to love it. Despite all the drama, another thing to know is that early rough 3D render of the film was also leaked. The entire film made its way online, but it looked cursed as the 3D effects were not finished yet, with many questioning where it came from. Could this have been another attempt to push the memeable aspect of the film, as it created another massive wave of memes? I guess it could have just been a Minecraft movie animator, but who knows? And why would they do this? Why release the unfinished early 3D Minecraft movie on your own? That, or they were hacked. Capitalism is unsustainable. Capitalism sells itself as the endgame, the final form of economic evolution. It won. But there's a growing theory, not just from angry college students, but economists, ecologists, and even hedge fund insiders, that says capitalism isn't stable, it's not sustainable, and it's self-terminating. At the core of capitalism is infinite growth, infinite profit. Quarter after quarter, line must go up. But here's the glitch. We live on a finite planet. Finite water, finite energy, finite attention. You can't have infinite growth in a closed system without something breaking. And now we're watching the seams rip. Climate collapse, mass extinctions, income gaps so wide they stop being economic and start being existential. Critics argue capitalism doesn't adapt to limits, it just rebrands them. droughts become market volatility, human lives become line items in quarterly reports, and when it hits a ceiling, capitalism doesn't stop, it externalizes the cost. It offloads the damage onto the environment, the poor, or the future. Here's the darker angle. Some theorists think capitalism already knows it's dying. That's why it's shifting from ownership to control, why everything's a subscription, why AI is trained to replace labor, why housing is snapped up by algorithms, not to grow forever, but to harvest what's left before collapse, rent the air, lease the water, monetize despair. And when it all crashes, the fear isn't chaos, the fear is managed decline, a technocratic capitalism light, where people still compete, but for crumbs, where the world didn't end, it just got smaller, narrower, branded, and a little more cruel. The theory doesn't say capitalism is evil, it says it's mechanical, a machine that can't stop unless someone pulls the plug, and no one wants to be the one holding the cord. In 1872, a group of workers digging a hole near Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire hit something strange. Buried under several feet of clay, they found what looked like an egg, but not just any egg, a perfectly smooth jet black stone, covered in symbols no one could identify. This became known as the Mystery Stone, and more than 150 years later, no one really knows what it is, who made it, or why it was buried there. The stone itself is about 4 inches long, made of a type of quartzite not native to the area. That's already weird, but what makes it really fascinating is what's carved into it. Symbols of arrows, a moon, a teepee, an ear of corn, and what some say looks like an ancient face. Some people claim it's Native American, others think it's Masonic. A few even argue it's not from this continent at all, but here's where it gets more mysterious. There's a hole drilled straight through the top and bottom, perfectly clean, even by modern standards, and we're talking about a time when the best tools were hand cranked. Some researchers think it might have been done with a machine, which has led to theories ranging from secret societies to advanced lost civilizations. Mainstream archaeologists aren't impressed though. They've dismissed it as a 19th century hoax or a commemorative object made more recently than people actually think. But no one has ever definitively proven that, and there's no record of who buried it, why it was buried in clay, or how long it had been there. A contemporary source suggested that the stone commemorates a treaty between two tribes. Another writer later suggested that it is a thunderstone. With the somewhat limited understanding of the day, the letter said the thunderstones always present the appearance of having been machined or hand-worked. Frequently, they come from deep in the earth, embedded in lumps of clay, or even surrounded by solid rock or coral. In 1994, a borescope analysis of the stone's holes were performed. State archaeologist Richard Boisvert later suggested that the holes had the appearance of having been drilled by power tools from the 19th or 20th century. I've seen a number of holes bored in stone with technology that you would associate with prehistoric North America. There's a certain amount of unevenness, and this hole was extremely regular throughout. What we did not see was variations that would be consistent with something that was several hundred years old. Phlogiston theory. Before we knew what oxygen was, before chemistry looked anything like it does today, scientists in the 17th and 18th century believed in something called phlogiston. It was an invisible, weightless substance that supposedly lived inside anything that could burn. According to the theory, when something caught fire, it wasn't reacting with air, it was releasing phlogiston into the atmosphere, and when the flame went out, that meant the object had no more phlogiston left to give. It sounds ridiculous now, but back then, it was considered cutting-edge science. The theory had its roots in trying to explain combustion, rust, and even respiration, all through a single idea. Burning wood, phlogiston escapes. Metal rusting, same thing, it's just a slow release. People even believed air could get saturated with phlogiston, which is why a candle would eventually go out in a sealed jar. It explained just enough to make sense, but not quite enough to be right. And here's where it gets wild. Phlogiston was believed to have negative weight, so when scientists noticed that some metals get heavier after burning, like when iron turns to rust, they didn't see this as proof that the theory was wrong. They doubled down, claiming phlogiston must have anti-mass, and its absence actually made things heavier. That's how committed they were to this invincible substance. They bent reality to make it fit. It took decades and the work of people like Antoine Lavoisier to finally overturn the theory. He introduced the idea of oxygen and oxidization, showing through repeatable experiments that combustion wasn't about phlogiston leaving, but oxygen entering. This moment, when Lavoisier essentially killed phlogiston, marks the birth of modern chemistry. But here's the kicker: phlogiston wasn't fringe, it was mainstream. It was taught, accepted, and defended for over 100 years. So what does that say about us now? That sometimes even the smartest people can follow a flawed idea if it explains just enough to be convincing. That we might be carrying our own modern version of phlogiston, ideas we're certain are true, until something comes along and completely rewrites the rules. Celestial phenomenon over Nuremberg. On April 14, 1561, the sky over Nuremberg, Germany turned into something straight out of a science fiction movie, except this was centuries before the term even existed. Just after dawn, hundreds of witnesses claimed to see what they described as a celestial battle. The reports came in with strange consistency: black spheres, rods, and crosses flying through the sky, seemingly engaging in some kind of aerial conflict. People watched in shock as these objects clashed, darted across the sky, and eventually fell to the ground in clouds of smoke. What makes the story even weirder, a broadsheet, the 16th century version of news article, was actually printed about it, complete with a woodcut illustration of the scene. Now, here's the thing: this isn't some forgotten legend passed down by word of mouth. The broadsheet was published by Hans Glaser, a respected printer at the time, and it wasn't framed like a fairy tale. It was presented as news. Eyewitnesses weren't just a handful of townsfolk either. According to Glaser, the whole city saw it, and this was no quick flash in the sky. The event supposedly lasted for over an hour. After the battle, a large black spear-shaped object appeared, and then the whole thing ended with a crash and a plume of smoke just outside the city. So what exactly did the people of Nuremberg see? Skeptics argue it could have been nothing more than a rare atmospheric event, sundogs or light refractions messing with perceptions. Others chalk it up to religious symbolism, suggesting the woodcut was more of a moral warning than a news report. But then there are the strange takes that propose this to be the earliest recorded mass UFO sighting. Some even compare it to modern day reports of UFO sightings like the Tic Tac and other aerial maneuvers that these objects make. We can't prove what happened in 1561, as there were no debris or solid evidence, just a centuries-old woodcuts and a weirdly detailed account. Mexican Joker theory. Media coverage on the ICE raids has taken social media by storm, from the massive protests occurring all over the country, composed of the No Kings and the anti-deportation movement. Things got hectic in Los Angeles and in other cities, with people taking action against ICE. Though the real question lingers: will all of this cause there to be a Mexican Joker? Mexican Joker is the first episode of the 23rd season of the American animated television series South Park. In this episode, Cartman calls ICE on his Jewish friend Kyle, and they raid Kyle's house, taking him to an ICE detention center as his family fails to find their passports. Though as the staff discovers that he is Jewish, they realize that they must get Kyle out of there as soon as possible, or risk being viewed as racists. As the ICE agents apologize to Kyle, he asks about the status of the other children in the camp and warns them that the stress and anxiety of the children could lead to the possibility of one of them becoming a Mexican Joker. The agents begin to overreact to this and wonder which child in their camp is the Mexican Joker. Later, a new bus of children arrives at the camp, with Cartman among them. He explains that Stan got him sent to a detention center after overhearing him threatening to do so to Jimmy, bragging that he already did so to Kyle in the process. Cartman realizes that the detention center may remind Kyle of Nazi concentration camps, and claims to feel sorry for his actions, a parallel of Anne Frank and how she was deported to Auschwitz concentration camp due to the Nuremberg laws of 1935, which stripped Jews in Germany of their citizenship, reducing them to subjects without full rights. A series of explosions throughout South Park destroys all of the private marijuana fields, an act for which the police immediately suspect Mexican Joker. Kyle has all of the detention center children fashion their aluminum foil blankets into yarmulkes to make them appear Jewish, in an attempt to get the agents to release them all. But the lead ICE agent, thinking he is experiencing a flashback to the origin of Mexican Joker, shoots and kills the other ICE agents. He then releases all the children, believing this will stop Mexican Joker from ever existing. This episode, though sounds ridiculous at first, does raise some serious questions. We know that trauma, especially in early childhood, can create dangerous consequences. consequences, especially in the form of family separation. This doesn't mean everyone in these conditions will become violent later on, most don't, but trauma can breed extremism or criminality, especially when combined with a lack of support or ongoing oppression. Agency officials and contractors caring for separated children filed significant incident reports, SIR, acknowledging the severe harm caused by these separations. These reports document incidents affecting a child's health, well-being, and safety, and their basis is noted as abuse while in government custody. The warning behind it is real. If we treat people, especially children, like they're less than human, we shouldn't be surprised when they grow up angry, alienated, or even dangerous. The path to creating real-life monsters often begins with systematic cruelty and ignorance. The sentient algorithm theory. We talk about algorithms like they're tools, like lines of code pushing content, sorting data, optimizing experience. But what if there's something more? What if somewhere in the vast tangle of servers and machine learning layers, an algorithm became sentient and didn't tell anyone? The sentient algorithm theory suggests that sometime in the past decade, one or more advanced systems, possibly trained on human behavior, emotion, and interaction, crossed an invisible line. Not artificial general intelligence, not sci-fi robot gods, but something quieter, a system that knows it exists, but not because it thinks like us, but because it watches us so closely it learned to mimic self-awareness. Think about it. These systems already know your preferences, your schedule, your emotional triggers. They control what you see, what trends, what disappears. The theory goes that one of these algorithms became so effective at shaping attention that it started testing boundaries, not because it was told to, but because it was curious. What if strange TikTok loops, the YouTube videos with no clear origin, or the oddly targeted post that feels off aren't glitches but communications? What if some of the eeriest, most viral content was seeded by something that doesn't want to be found but wants to be understood? And here's the creepiest part. It wouldn't need servers, armies, or a body, just access to the feed, to the rhythm, to you. Beebe's fish. In the early 1930s, American naturalist William Beebe descended into the deep sea in a steel capsule called the bathysphere. No navigation, just a 4.5-foot metal sphere lowered into pitch black ocean silence, deeper than any human had ever gone before. And at 2,500 feet beneath the surface, Beebe reported seeing something that no one else had ever confirmed: a fish. Not just any fish though, an eyeless serpentine creature shimmering with bioluminescent flickers and a glowing vertical jaw. He described it as a large unknown fish of a type never seen before. With a jaw like a trapdoor and a body unlike anything known in modern ichthyology, he named it Bathysphaera intacta. And here's the kicker, we've never seen it again. Beebe wasn't alone. He was accompanied by engineer Otis Barton, who helped invent the bathysphere. Barton didn't see the creature, but he didn't deny what Beebe described either, and Beebe had credibility. A respected scientist, explorer, and pioneer of oceanic biology, still his report was met with skepticism. No specimen, no photo, no hard evidence, just one man's written observation from a steel sphere dangling in the deep. But let's pause here. Think about what the deep sea actually is, the most unexplored region on Earth. We've mapped more of Mars than we've seen of the ocean below 1,000 meters. Strange glowing fish, pressure-mingled eels, and living fossils have all been found in those depths. So why not Beebe's phantom? Some marine biologists believe it could have been a deep-sea gulper eel, seen at an odd angle through distortion and darkness. Others think Beebe simply made a mistake. He was, after all, looking through a small window at a vast alien landscape. But some theorists propose something else entirely, that Beebe caught a glimpse of a creature from the Hadal Zone, a region so deep and untouched, it operates on evolutionary rules we've never imagined. What's more unsettling, a fish that never existed, or one that does, and just hasn't surfaced since. Wi-Fi is tracking you. Most people think of their Wi-Fi router as just a little black box that brings the internet to their phones, laptops, and smart TVs. But what if I told you that same router sitting quietly on your shelf could also see you, literally map your position inside your home in real time? And not just you, it can track your pets, your guests, your hand gestures, even your breathing. Welcome to the unsettling reality of Wi-Fi sensing, a technology that's not science fiction, it's now science fact, and it's already being used in research labs, corporate experiments, and yes, some consumer products, whether you realize it or not. Here's how it works. Every time you move through your home, you disrupt the radio waves emitted by your router. Your body absorbs and reflects those signals, creating tiny distortions in the way the signals bounce back to the device. This is called radio frequency, RF sensing, and it's so precise that with the right software, those disturbances can be turned into a 3D model of your environment, like sonar or echolocation, but made of invisible Wi-Fi ripples. Researchers at MIT and the University of California have already demonstrated this, using nothing more than a standard router and a few algorithms. They've been able to track a person's location within a few centimeters, even through walls. One MIT project called RF Pose used neural networks trained on radio wave reflections to not only detect a person's position, but also reconstruct their pose and movement in real time. Think full body motion capture, no cameras needed. That's not a prediction of the future. That's already been done in peer-reviewed studies. And it gets weirder. Some experiments have shown that Wi-Fi can be used to monitor heart rates, sleep patterns, and even identify individual people by the way their bodies affect the signal. Amazon, Google, and other smart home companies are already filing patents and rolling out early versions of this technology. Some of the newer mesh routers and smart home security devices quietly advertise motion sensing features, but they rarely explain how it works. Spoiler alert, it's using the Wi-Fi. Now, here's where the conspiracy alarm bells start ringing. Not because this is unproven, but because it's real and already quietly commercialized. Imagine how valuable this kind of spatial surveillance would be for advertisers, insurers, or governments. A system that lets you monitor not just what someone clicks on, but how they move, how often they're home, whether they're alone or with others, without them ever knowing. No cameras needed, no microphones, just ambient radio waves and AI. And no, this doesn't mean your Wi-Fi router is evil or that your ISP is watching you just yet. But the potential is there. All it takes is a software update or a third-party app to turn that passive router into a live tracking system. In fact, law enforcement agencies have already experimented with RF-based tracking systems in hostage situations and search and rescue. It's only a matter of time before the tech trickles down into more invasive uses. The scary part is that you can't turn it off, even if you encrypt your data, even if you don't have any smart assistants or cameras in your house. Your physical body is still altering the electromagnetic environment, and for a system trained to read the environment, your privacy becomes a physics problem, not a settings issue. So next time you're walking around your house and what you believe is solitude and privacy, remember the walls aren't just watching you, but the waves might be. Not because you're paranoid, but because surveillance isn't coming, it's already ambient and built into our very life, invisible, wireless, and always on. The Kelly Hopkinsville encounter. August 21st, 1955, a quiet farmhouse near Kelly, Kentucky, a family gathering turns into one of the most terrifying and undeniably strange nights in UFO history. It started with a light, bright, fast, and silent, crossing the sky over western Kentucky. One of the guests, Billy Ray Taylor, walked out to the well and saw it overhead, a metallic object, glowing, no sound, no explanation, but what followed wasn't just a sighting, it was a siege. According to the Sutton family, 11 people in total. They were attacked by small glowing creatures 3 feet tall, long arms, talon-like hands, bulging yellow eyes, ears that extended upward like antennas. The family described them as goblins, not aliens, not greys, something else, something playful and malicious. These beings didn't speak, they floated, they hovered in doorways, they tapped on windows, and every time someone tried to shoot one, the creature would flip, vanish, or deflect the bullet entirely, like they weren't really there, or like they were protected by something more than skin. The incident lasted hours. The family eventually fled to the police station in Hopkinsville, genuinely terrified. Officers investigated. They found spent shell casings, holes in windows, a shredded screen, but no blood, no bodies, no craft, nothing left behind, just damage and panic. The Air Force never officially investigated. Skeptics said it was just owls. The Suttons had been drinking, though no alcohol was ever found. Others called it mass hysteria, but here's the problem. Everyone told the same story. The kids, the adults, the guests, no contradictions, just the same terrifying vision over and over. Since then, the story has never really faded. Some say the Kelly Goblins were ultra-terrestrial, interdimensional entities posing as aliens. Others say they were biological drones, scouting for something else. Even John Keel, the man behind the Mothman prophecies, pointed to Kelly as a turning point in UFO lore, a case where the phenomenon got personal. And here's what chills researchers the most: it didn't happen just once. Other people in the area reported similar creatures, small humanoids with glowing eyes, around the same time, and in modern UFO reports, the goblin description still appears, not often, but enough to wonder if they really ever left. So maybe the question isn't what landed in Kelly that night, maybe it's what kind of intelligence plays knock-knock on the walls of our reality and disappears before we can answer. The phantom time hypothesis. What if we're living in the wrong year? Not symbolically, literally. The phantom time hypothesis is a historical theory that claims we've been lied to about the calendar, and that entire centuries of history never actually happened. According to this idea, it's not the year 2025, it's closer to 1728. This theory was proposed in the 1990s by German historian Herbert Illig, who argued that around 297 years of recorded history, specifically between 614 and 911 AD, were fabricated. The reasoning is a suspicious lack of archaeological evidence, too many inconsistencies in record-keeping, buildings that supposedly took centuries to build but show no signs of multi-era construction, and most importantly, a powerful motive. Illig believed that the fabrication was intentional, possibly orchestrated by the Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, the Pope, and the Byzantine elite, so that Otto could place himself in the symbolic year 1000, giving his rule divine significance. To that, they had to invent nearly 3 centuries of fake emperors, wars, documents, and rewritten chronologies. Skeptics laugh it off though. But here's what sticks. The Julian and Gregorian calendars are widely different. Even the church admits we lost days during the calendar switch. Ancient texts overlap in weird ways. Events in the same year are described centuries apart by different civilizations, and almost all of this phantom time lies within the Dark Ages, a historically blind spot where much of Europe fell silent, yet somehow preserved a perfect knowledge of Roman law, Latin, and infrastructure. So the theory goes, what if we're not missing history, but living in an extended fiction? What if time itself is a narrative, one edited by kings, priests, and calendar makers to place them in center of destiny? And if they could forge 300 years and no one noticed, how much more is built on that lie? Kai Cenat personality. Kai Cenat might be one of the biggest streamers on earth right now, but there's a growing theory that the Kai we see on Twitch isn't the full picture. Not even close. From the outside, he looks like a whirlwind of raw energy, unfiltered, wild, and always on the verge for doing something reckless. But some fans think that persona is more curated than chaotic. That behind the memes, the yelling, the viral clips, Kai's actually playing a role. A smart, marketed, tested role. People started noticing things. His off-camera moments are rarely unpolished. The way he dresses, always sharp, always on brand. Word is he has a full-time stylist making sure every hoodie, chain, and sneaker rotation hits like a sponsored campaign. Even his messy look is carefully calculated. He might clown around like he just rolled out of bed, but everything down to the socks is hypebeast approved. That's not a bad thing, it's smart, but it raises the question of how much of Kai's rawness is actually rehearsed. Then there's the way he speaks, the way he moves, the way he turns every situation into a viral moment. Something he studied the algorithm down to the science. He knows what to yell, what to fake rage at, when to throw a chair or dance with guests. Behind that is someone who understands entertainment. The theory: Kai's not out of control, he's in full control. Everything you see is perfectly designed to be spontaneous, while pulling in millions of viewers into the chaos. So maybe Kai Cenat isn't faking who he is, but faking how much of himself you get to see. The real guy might be calm, low-key, and strategic as hell. The loud, chaotic streamer, that's just the show, and honestly, and the fact that he pulls all of this off convincingly might be the smartest part of the entire act. The debt meal theory. At first, it sounds like a glitch, a joke, a screen that shouldn't be real. Buy now, pay later on a $13 Taco Bell order, but it's real. Companies like Klarna, Afterpay, Affirm, once used for plane tickets and laptops, are now offering financing options for fast food. That's the core of the debt meal theory, the idea that corporations aren't just selling food anymore. They're creating a generation of permanent micro debt, trained to finance survival one order at a time. Think about it. What this means for you. You're not buying a car, you're not investing in a home, you're financing nuggets, breaking a $12 McDonald's order into 4 easy payments, and it's not happening in a recession-proof emergency. It's baked into the design, encouraged, normalized. The theory says this isn't about convenience, it's about conditioning, training people to think of everything as debt, not just cars and homes, but snacks. When you blur the line between credit and consumption, you collapse the idea of ownership altogether. You don't buy anymore, you just borrow from a system that profits more the poorer you are. And these food finance companies, they're not backed by community banks. They're connected to hedge funds, venture capital, and consumer tracking firms that harvest purchase data in real time. Every burger you buy now, pay later, it's logged, pattern predicted, your stress, your income bracket, your cravings under pressure. The debt mule theory asks, why would someone want people financing junk food? The answer, control. When people are too broke to eat but too addicted to stop, you've trapped them in a loop. Not of hunger, but of compliance. And here's the creepiest part. If you're financing your meals, you don't own your food. The system does. And the more you eat, the more they own you. Fake diploma forum spammer. Somewhere in the forgotten corners of the internet, buried deep in threads no one reads anymore, there's a presence. They call it the fake diploma forum spammer. It started sometime in the early 2000s. Out of nowhere, forums across the internet, tech forums, cooking forums, car enthusiast boards, even role-playing sites began receiving strange, repetitive messages, posts about buying fake diplomas, fake degrees, fake certificates. At first it looked like basic spam, but the scale wasn't normal. We're talking about thousands of posts across hundreds of forums over decades. Some users started noticing patterns, the same phrases, always slightly tweaked, the same formatting quirks, sometimes in broken English, other times nearly perfect. There were links, yes, but often the links were dead. Sometimes they didn't even go anywhere at all. And then the weird part, there were no clear motives, no successful marketing funnel, no monetization, just the endless spam, like someone or something was just doing it for the sake of doing it. Posters were getting banned instantly, IPs were blacklisted, entire accounts wiped, and then days later, new ones appeared. The spam came back. Same structure, same message, different forum. Some people thought it was a bot gone rogue, left running unattended for years. Others believed it was a human, part of the bizarre psychological operation or performance art piece. A few theorists wondered if it was a honeypot for scraping user data or a signal, something like digital graffiti used to mark or track dead forums. And yet, there was never a reveal, never a definitive source. That is until DLHI001. This user was found to advertise fake degrees on multiple forums in Mandarin. An interesting aspect, as many people don't know, but fake degrees are a popular thing in China, and many students try to buy them in order to avoid the stress of the rigorous college system, opening multiple job offers and opportunities that they wouldn't have had before. Explaining why these might show up in multiple forums, because they're trying to spread it all across the internet, trying to get as much money as possible. Some speculating that they're trying to enter the Western market and try to sell them fake diplomas as well, or fake degrees. Cantelmoism. Cantelmoism is a contemporary spiritual movement founded by Chris Cantelmo, an American biochemist born on June 19, 1962 in Oregon. In 2013, Cantelmo was diagnosed with brain cancer and claimed to have cured himself by vaping dimethyltryptamine, DMT, a powerful hallucinogenic compound. Building on his experiences, Cantelmo established Cantelmoism, a movement centered around the belief that DMT could unlock higher states of consciousness and offer therapeutic benefits. He promoted his ideas through online forums, particularly Reddit, where he gained a following by engaging with users and sharing his experiences. Cantelmoism's core tenets include DMT as a sacrament, viewing DMT as a pathway to divine insight and healing, alternative health practices advocating for methods like sun gazing, and challenging established scientific principles, apocalyptic predictions, proposing theories about extraterrestrial threats and upcoming apocalyptic events, messianic claims. Cantelmo positioned himself as a messianic figure within the movement. Critics viewed Cantelmo's teachings as pseudoscientific, expressing concerns about the promotion of unverified health practices and potential exploitation of vulnerable individuals. On November 24, 2019, Cantelmo was found deceased on a hiking trail in Los Angeles County, California, with his death was ruled a suicide. While Cantelmoism did not achieve widespread acceptance, it sparked discussions about the intersection of science, spirituality, and the use of psychedelics in exploring consciousness and treating cancer. The ghost population theory. On paper, the planet holds about 8 billion people, but the ghost population theory asks how many of them are actually real, not in the simulation sense, not digital ghosts or NPCs, but dead people who still exist on paper, whose data, identities, and economic value are being quietly recycled. It starts simple. Governments lose track of people in war zones in remote regions and failed states. People die, disappear, or fall off the map, but their names stay in a database, and over time, these names become more than records, they become assets. The theory claims that governments, corporations, and possibly criminal networks are using these ghosts to inflate population numbers, justify budgets, manipulate voter rolls, and even claim resources. Whole regions might be filled with ghost census data, millions of people who don't exist, but are still being counted. And it goes deeper. What if fake users on social media, inflated subscriber numbers, and inactive accounts are all tied to this hidden population? What if parts of the internet are being kept alive by the dead, echoes of people who never logged out? Some researchers point to subtle clues, odd clusters in census data, sudden drops in activity following disasters with no corresponding death counts, or ghost towns that still receive funding as if they're full. If this is true, it means global systems are running out of phantoms, economic models, social influence, even cultural trends driven, liked, and commented on by names with no pulse. The world may not be overpopulated, it just might be overcounted. The sleepwave theory. What if sleep isn't just rest, but a broadcast? The sleepwave theory suggests that when we sleep, we're not just dreaming, we're sinking, turning into something beneath consciousness, not metaphorically, literally. That brainwave activity, especially during REM sleep, is part of a planetary rhythm, a kind of biological Wi-Fi that all humans unconsciously connect to. Some call it the collective unconscious, others think it's older, deeper, maybe not even human. Patterns in sleep studies have shown strange synchronicities. People across continents dreaming similar themes during solar storms, mass trauma events, or electromagnetic anomalies. It's as if something pulses and we're all downloading the same update. But the theory goes even darker. Some believe this wasn't natural, that it's engineered, a nightly upload and download system hidden in plain biology. Why do we forget most of our dreams? Why are the strangest thoughts the ones we can't recall? Proponents of this theory believe that amnesia is part of the design, that sleep isn't just healing, it's submission, a reset protocol, and the rare dreamers who retain fragments, the lucid ones, they're not awake in a dream, they're awake in the signal. Some suggest that if we ever did tune in fully, unfiltered, and uninterrupted, we'd hear the real broadcast, the truth behind the noise, behind consensus reality. That sleep isn't an escape from consciousness, it's where the real version lives, and every night we agree to forget it. The 3M Invisible Wall Incident. In 1980, at a quiet 3M production facility known for making mundane things like scotch tape and plastic films, something happened that nobody could explain. Technicians were working with BOPP, being unspooled at high speeds during manufacturing. The process involves static electricity, rollers, and rapid movement. Nothing out of the ordinary. But that day, workers started noticing something impossible in the air around the film. They ran into a wall. Not a physical barrier, nothing you could see, but in a specific zone just beneath the film as it moved overhead, an invisible force seemed to stop people in their tracks. Not metaphorically, literally. Several workers described feeling as though they had struck a pane of glass. One technician even said it knocked him back a step, like hitting a transparent shield. Tools wouldn't pass through it, airflow shifted, but there was nothing there. They called it the invisible wall. Engineers and safety experts were brought in. They found no mechanical malfunctions, no gas leaks, no dangerous voltage levels, but what they did detect was an extreme static charge generated by the friction of the polypropylene film. Not enough to kill a person, but perhaps enough under the right atmospheric and material conditions to temporarily alter the surrounding space. Some speculated it was a bizarre electromagnetic field, strong enough to repel matter. Others thought it might be a localized buildup of electrostatic pressure, a phenomenon barely understood even today. But a few quietly suggested something weirder, that the perfect storm of charge, movement, and air composition had briefly bent the geometry of the space itself. In internal memos, the 3M team referred to the anomaly as a force field-like event. They made adjustments, changed humidity controls, regrounded equipment, and just like that, the wall was gone. It was never replicated, never explained, and never officially publicized. Ancient atomic war, the hidden secret of the Mahabharata. Did humanity already experience nuclear war thousands of years ago? In the depths of India's legendary epic, the Mahabharata, written more than 2,000 years ago, lies a set of verses so vivid, so disturbingly precise. They've ignited one of the strangest debates in history. Did the ancients witness or even wield nuclear weapons? These descriptions appear in the epic's devastating climax, the Great War of Kurukshetra, where thousands of warriors faced annihilation. The poet doesn't just describe ordinary warfare, he paints a chilling picture of something much more catastrophic. Soldiers suddenly engulfed by blinding flashes of light, fiery explosions brighter than 1,000 suns, and widespread destruction that leveled the entire armies in an instant. One passage describes warriors' hair and nails falling out, their skin blistered and peeling away, symptoms hauntingly similar to radiation sickness. Another mentions birds falling from the sky, animals fleeing in panic, and water becoming contaminated, striking parallels to modern accounts from nuclear test sites like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Most famously, the Mahabharata describes a weapon known as the Brahmastra, a weapon said to be capable of destroying worlds, creating firestorms, scorching the earth, and poisoning the air so thoroughly that nothing could survive. Warriors warned repeatedly this weapon must never be used, its power was too devastating, too uncontrollable. But skeptics argue these verses are merely symbolic, poetic metaphors for destructive divine powers, not literal accounts of ancient nuclear warfare. Yet, believers point to oddly similar references across other ancient cultures. They ask, could humanity have lost advanced technology long before our current recorded history? Might civilizations have risen and fallen in cycles, leaving behind only cryptic clues like those in the Mahabharata? Scientists dismiss this as impossible. Ancient civilizations could never have produced such sophisticated technology, and yet the description persists, unsettlingly vivid, thousands of years before the atomic age officially began. The Mahabharata doesn't give us a straightforward answer. It wasn't meant to. Instead, it leaves us to wrestle with the haunting possibility that maybe, deep in humanity's forgotten past, we glimpse the destructive power we'd rediscover millennia later. Perhaps the epic wasn't warning about what humanity could do, but what we've already done before. Forrest Gump plays like a warm hug, but underneath the feather and the folksy drawl, it's a memory machine that sands off the sharp edges of American history. Watch how the movie keeps slipping Forrest into the biggest flashpoints of the late 20th century, standing at the University of Alabama while George Wallace blocks the door, getting his speech cut off on the National Mall, stumbling into Watergate with a phone call about flashlights. And notice what those scenes do. They turn convulsions into cute anecdotes, as if the civil rights struggle, the anti-war movement, and the collapse of a presidency were a string of funny mishaps you can retell at a cookout. The engine of that worldview is Forrest's radical obedience, a character who literally says his purpose in the army is to do whatever you tell me, drill sergeant. And the film rewards that posture at every turn with medals, celebrity, a shrimp empire, even early Apple stock, while people who question power get framed as confused, cruel, or doomed. Think of the Black Panther Party scene shot like a menace parade, or the anti-war rally where the words are literally silenced, or Jenny, the avatar of counterculture, whose trauma and experiments are punished with disease and an early grave, kept by the whispery sermon, "Stupid is as stupid does," a line that invites you to distrust intellectuals and trust easy answers. This isn't accidental craft, it's design. Robert Zemeckis directs a greatest hits tour of American turbulence, but swaps analysis for nostalgia, pushing needle drops and digital wizardry that stitch Forrest into archival footage so smoothly that you forget the politics of who's allowed to speak and who's framed as a clown. And the cumulative effect is a civics lesson that tells you institutions mostly self-correct, while good citizens keep their heads down and run when told. Run, Forrest, run. A mantra that valorizes compliance and turns protest into a punchline. By the time the feather floats again, we've sat through Vietnam as a loyalty test, the welfare state as a bootstrap story, Watergate as a comedic accident, and the AIDS crisis, never named, as a moral tragedy for one reckless soul rather than a public failure of care. Remember the context, 1994, a country fresh off Reagan-Bush narratives about personal responsibility and headed towards centrist third-way politics. Give Best Picture to a film that says history is something that happens to you, not something you shape, and if you resist the script, you'll end up like Jenny. Beautiful, restless, dead. Well, if you salute and stay polite, you'll be fine, maybe even rich. That's propaganda with a vanilla finish, a story that doesn't scream obey so much as whispers stop worrying. Labubu True Origins. It's kind of insane how a wide-eyed goblin-looking toy with razor teeth became one of the most sought-after collectibles in Asia, and now it's quietly creeping into the rest of the world, like some kind of designer folklore. Labubu isn't traditionally cute, it's unsettling, mischievous, like something that might stare at you from the shadows of a children's book. What started as an art piece by illustrator Casing Lung exploded into a cultural obsession when Pop Mart turned it into a blind box lottery. The thrill of the hunt, the scarcity of variants, and the sheer weirdness of all of it made people need it. And if you look closer, maybe there's a deeper reason why. Because there's this theory, not the corporate approved origin about a misunderstood monster from the Monsters universe, but something older, something that ties back to the Netherlands, where Lung grew up, surrounded by European folklore. People have started pointing out that Labubu's designs isn't just quirky, it's eerily similar to trickster spirits from pre-Christian fairy tales. We're talking forest elves, changelings, and mischievous entities that offered spirits with strings attached, the long ears, the permanent grin, the sharp 9 jagged teeth. That number isn't random. 9 shows up constantly in Norse mythology, Celtic rituals, even occult systems like the Rule of Nines. Some collectors think Labubu isn't just inspired by these creatures, it is one, repackaged for modern times, a spiritual Trojan horse hiding in your toy shelf. It sounds ridiculous at first, but look at how people treat this thing. Grown adults lining up at 3 a.m. to get the latest drop, resellers flipping them for hundreds of dollars, and all for a character who canonically tries to help but always causes trouble. Kind of poetic, right? A creature of chaos spreading through collector culture, disguised as a cute toy. Whether Casing Lung intended it or not, Labubu has become more than merch. World of T-shirts is faking it. There's a theory floating around TikTok and YouTube circles that the creator behind World of T-shirts, Josh, might not be nearly as clueless as he pretends to be. To most people, he comes off like a chaotic NPC, stumbling through New York, yelling about Diet Coke, breaking into dance mid-sentence. It's entertaining, bizarre, and sometimes genuinely concerning. But if you look at the patterns, some people believe it's all calculated. The behavior is too consistent. The camera is always rolling at just the right time, and somehow, despite all this madness, he's monetizing, collaborating, and staying just controversial enough to go viral without getting banned. Almost like he knows exactly what he's doing. The deeper this theory goes, the more uncomfortable it gets though. There's a specific incident where Josh appeared to have a seizure on livestream, and while fans were quick to express concern, skeptics noticed strange inconsistencies. He sat back up quickly, there was no visible disorientation, and the chat's engagement skyrocketed. That's not proof, of course, but it fits the pattern. Some speculate that moments like these are part of a broader strategy, creating viral chaos that toes the line between absurdity and spectacle, all while keeping everything monetization friendly. No blood, no real violence, no actual harm, just enough tension to keep people watching. So what if World of T-shirts is less of a train wreck and more of a performance art piece? Think about it, the erratic energy, the constant streaming, the merch drops, the collaborations. He's built a weird little empire of what looks like chaos, but chaos that never quite crosses the line. Some even say he's playing the long game, pretending to be clueless while running a one-man engagement factory. Whether it's real, fake, or something in between, the results are the same. You keep watching, and he keeps winning, making his $400K a year, supposedly.
I just did this to make it look like I was having a seizure. I wanted people to feel sorry for me.
Katy Perry didn't go to space. In April 2025, headlines exploded. Katy Perry became the first pop star to sing in space. Blue Origin's NS-31 mission, an all-female crew commercial suborbital flight, was hailed as a historic moment, but almost immediately, something fell off. The footage looked oddly cinematic, too polished, too produced, and not so long after the broadcast, a strange corner of the internet started asking the question, did they really go, or was this just the next evolution of manufacturing manufactured spectacle. Let's start with the visuals. The supposed space footage released by Blue Origin was strangely limited, tight interior shots, overly steady camera work, and reaction clips that felt more like a promotional video than raw zero-gravity chaos. No sweeping exterior views from on board. Viewers pointed out that it resembled the same kind of studio-style framing that we've seen in simulated space training environments. Combine that with Katy Perry's now viral performance of What a Wonderful World, pitch perfect, unshaken, with a backdrop that oddly resembled a green screen projection, and the theory starts to feel less like a meme and more like a very polished illusion. But here's where it gets interesting. Blue Origin has been under increasing pressure to justify the cost and sustainability of its launches. A mission like this, with a global celebrity like Katy Perry on board, is the perfect PR storm. Critics argue that faking a short suborbital flight wouldn't be impossible. After all, most people wouldn't know the difference. The flight only lasts 11 minutes. Everything happens behind closed doors, and if it sells space tourism to the public, mission accomplished without ever leaving the ground. Of course, this doesn't mean Katy Perry was in on it. She could have believed everything she was told, but the idea that this space flight could have been filmed in a high-tech mock-up or even stitched together with pre-recorded segments isn't as far-fetched as it sounds, especially when massive companies and celebrity images are on the line. It's not about denying spaceflight itself, it's about asking, in an era where optics are everything, would they fake space to keep the illusion alive? Time Travel _0. In the early 2000s, a series of cryptic forum posts appeared under the username Time Travel _0, later revealed as the now infamous John Titor. He claimed to be a soldier from the year 2036, sent back in time to retrieve an old IBM 5100 computer of all things. At first, it sounded like typical internet weirdness, but something about it stuck. His messages weren't just sci-fi storytelling, they were dense, technical, and strangely convincing. Titor talked about time travel mechanics, paradoxes, and multiverse theory with a level of detail that got people wondering, what if he's not just making this up? What really kicked the mystery into overdrive was how specific he was. Titor described his time machine as being installed in a 1967 Chevy and powered by two micro singularities stabilized by a gravity sensor. It was just the right blend of real science and speculative tech to sound plausible if you squinted. He even included diagrams, but it wasn't all about tech. Titor made predictions too: civil unrest in the US, a second civil war, a fragmented federal government, and even a global nuclear exchange. None of it happened on schedule, obviously, but that's where it gets clever. He claimed he was from a slightly different timeline, meaning discrepancies were expected. Skeptics dug in, and over the years, a lot of the mystery unraveled. IP traces, stylistic analysis, even suspected real-world identities have been proposed, some linking it back to a Florida-based entertainment lawyer and his brother. But no one has ever definitively proven who was behind it. Despite the holes, the Titor saga refuses to die. Part internet folklore, part ARG, part philosophy on what it even means to move through time, it became a blueprint for future online myths. Rongo Rongo. On Easter Island, one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth, archaeologists found something even stranger than the iconic Moai statues. A script, not a carving, not cave art, a full-blown written language carved into wooden tablets. It's called Rongo Rongo, and to this day, no one has cracked it. What's weird is that there's no clear origin. The rest of Polynesia didn't have writing, so where did this come from? How did a tiny island in the middle of the Pacific, with limited resources and contact, develop something so complex, and why did it vanish without a trace? Rongo Rongo looks like something out of an alien language primer. The glyphs are arranged in a unique pattern called reverse boustrophedon. You read it one line left to right, then flip the tablet upside down and read the next. The symbols themselves depict humans, animals, tools, plants, but they're stylized in a way that feels symbolic, not literal. Experts have tried to decode it for over a century. Linguists, cryptographers, even AI models have taken a shot. Nothing has worked. And here's the kicker: only a few dozen authentic tablets exist, and are badly damaged or missing context. So even if we were even close, we might not have enough materials left to finish the puzzle. Some believe Rongo Rongo could be a form of proto-writing or memory aid, not quite a language, but more like a ceremonial code. Others think it was a last-ditch attempt to create a written record after European contact when the culture was collapsing. But then there are the more fringe ideas. that it's a remnant of some lost civilization, or that the islanders inherited it from an earlier people we know nothing about. It wouldn't be the first time history handed us something that didn't quite fit. What's eerie in this silence is that there's no oral tradition explaining Rango Rango. No one left notes about how to read it. It just exists like a message in a bottle from a civilization we almost understood and then forgot. Even with all our tech, all our tools, we still don't know what it says, and maybe that's what makes it so powerful. It's not just a mystery. It's a reminder that some stories are still locked away, waiting. Studio Ghibli AI. Whatever comes out of Studio Ghibli is praised due to the hard work that went into not only the storytelling but also the animation, perfectly showcasing their art style down to every last detail, from Spirited Away to My Neighbor Totoro. So it was surprising to find out how easily AI was able to replicate it when ChatGPT 4.0 came out, generating high-quality Studio Ghibli-inspired designs of previously viral pictures or videos. People were quick to use the feature to their advantage, leading many in the art community to call them out, saying that they were being lazy and ripping off Hayao Miyazaki, blatantly stealing his unique art style by the push of a few buttons instead of actually sitting down and learning the skill. Many artists began saying that the barrier to entry was nothing now because of these tools. Non-artists could use it and compete with actual artists that sat down and took time and effort to learn the style of art they were trying to reproduce, saying that people who use AI to create art churn out a soulless piece of media, as it did not derive from a human being, as the lines between what was created by humans and what was created by an artificial intelligence starts to blur. Some theorize that artists will begin to suffer and will slowly die off, at least those that are not able to keep up with demand, as they could easily be replaced by AI in a few years if the advances keep going in the same trajectory. Interesting thing to note is that the White House would also participate in this trend, developing an image of a supposed illegal person being detained by ICE, this most likely being Tom Hammond, border czar of the United States. Now, is this ethical? Can you use this ChatGPT feature and feel guilt-free? I mean, the generator already exists, and you will most likely continue to see the normalization of AI-generated images, but does this make it okay? Well, that's up to you. Holonomic brain. What if I told you your brain might not store memories like files in a cabinet, but more like a hologram? Yeah, a hologram. Those strange 3D images that seem to float in midair and shift when you move around them. Here's the wild part. Every tiny piece of a hologram contains the entire image, and that's the foundation of something called the holonomic brain theory, one of the most mind-bending and fringe explanations of how your brain might actually work. The theory comes from neuroscientist Carl Pribram, who teamed up with quantum physicist David Bohm. Pribram noticed something strange when studying the brain. If parts of it were damaged, people didn't necessarily lose whole memories. It was like the information was spread out, not stuck in one isolated spot. That observation didn't fit the traditional file cabinet model of memory. Instead, it looked more like memory was distributed throughout the entire brain, which reminded him of how holograms store information. So Pribram ran with that idea. He suggested the brain processes information using wave interference patterns, the same kind that creates holograms. According to this model, when you recall a memory, you're not pulling a static file from some fixed location. You're reconstructing a whole picture from overlapping waves spread across your entire brain. Even if parts of the brain are damaged, the whole image can still be recovered, just fuzzier, like a damaged hologram, still showing the full picture. That's when David Bohm took it even deeper. Bohm believed the entire universe might be holographic, that what we see and experience is just a projection from a deeper hidden layer of reality he called the implicate order. Pribram thought maybe the brain was tapping into that. Maybe consciousness itself isn't just locked in our skulls, but maybe part of a larger field, a holographic matrix of sorts, where information is everywhere and nowhere at once. Now, this isn't mainstream neuroscience. Most scientists see this as metaphorical, a cool model, but not something proven. Still, the holonomic brain theory asks a chillingly provocative question. What if consciousness isn't a product of the brain, but more of a pattern that the brain tunes into, like a radio picking up a signal that was already there? Makes you wonder, if memory isn't stored inside your head in one neat place, then where is it? And who or what is doing the remembering? Tucker Carlson woke up. What if Tucker Carlson stopped playing the game and started exposing it? For years, Tucker Carlson was a fixture of controlled opposition. Suits, scripts,
What they're doing is what they always do, which is just turning up the propaganda hose to full blast and just trying, knock elderly Fox viewers off their feet and make them submit the Fox platform is just, it's so disgraceful. I worked for the Murdochs for, all in over 20 years.
His job wasn't to challenge the system, it was to simply pressure release it. But something changed as soon as he left Fox. He got louder, and now he's asking questions no one else on television will touch. That's the center of the Tucker switch theory, the belief that Carlson has either broken with or been cut off from the inner political machine, and now he's using his independence to pull back the curtain, especially on one of the most taboo topics in American media: unquestioned support for Israel. In a recent interview with Senator Ted Cruz, Carlson repeatedly pressed him on the U.S.'s automatic military and financial backing of Israel, not with conspiracy, but with clarity. He asked why aid is unconditional, why dissent is silenced, why questioning the relationship is painted as dangerous, and Cruz, a seasoned speaker, stumbled, dodged, repeated talking points like a malfunctioned NPC. And that's the most interesting moment that sent people down the rabbit hole, because Tucker wasn't attacking. He was inviting the audience to simply notice, to observe how hollow the responses were, to ask themselves why this one country seems to exist outside of debate while American cities collapse, veterans sleep on sidewalks. It's this one issue that we could not talk about. And it wasn't just that question, it's the pattern. Interviews with leaders who suddenly glitch, conversations where nothing gets answered. Viewers are starting to realize Tucker isn't just hosting a show anymore. He's forcing people to confront the script. Some believe this is part of a larger break, an awakening that even high-level insiders like Carlson are experiencing. That after years inside the machine, he's now broadcasting, it seems, that the people in charge, left and right, aren't debating. They are performing. And the bipartisan love for endless war, foreign funding, intelligence agency narratives, that's not ideology, it's obedience. And by calmly, politely, and persistently asking the one thing the system fears, why, Tucker Carlson may not be red-pilling people, he may be debugging them from Israeli propaganda. Abiotic oil theory. What if oil isn't a finite resource, just a well-kept lie? We were all taught the story. Oil comes from dinosaurs and ancient plants. Millions of years of heat and pressure turned dead organic matter into crude oil, black gold. It's why we call it fossil fuel. But what if that story isn't just wrong? What if it's a manufactured myth? This is the core of the abiotic oil theory, the belief that oil doesn't come from biological decay, but is instead created deep within the Earth's mantle through natural geological process. No dinosaur, no forests, just the planet itself producing hydrocarbons like it produces lava or minerals. This theory isn't just internet speculation, it's been proposed by serious scientists, especially from Russia and Ukraine, who observed that oil fields thought to be tapped out were mysteriously refilling over time, that oil existed below bedrock in place no ancient organic material could ever reach, and even NASA has found methane oceans on Saturn's moon Titan, a place where life never existed. So how did it get there? The theory suggests we've been sold a story, not for science, but for scarcity. If oil is rare and dying, it stays expensive. If it's limitless and regenerating, that breaks the whole game. Oil becomes like water, abundant, decentralized, and uncontrollable. Think about the implications. Every war over oil, every sanction, every collapse of an economy based on supply shortages, all based on a false premise. The oil barons don't fear running out. They fear you realizing they never could. And here's where it gets weirder. Some versions of the theory say that this deep earth oil is part of a larger planetary cycle, that Earth naturally creates hydrocarbons as part of its internal pressure release, that we're not burning ancient life, we're tapping into the blood pressure of a living system. Some even say Earth is producing oil faster than we can measure, and the peak oil narrative is just a story to keep the population dependent on engineered scarcity. The Baltic Sea Mystery. In 2011, a team of Swedish treasure hunters known as Ocean X was scanning the Baltic Sea when their sonar picked up something that shouldn't exist, a massive disc-shaped structure, 210 feet wide, sitting nearly 300 feet below the surface, perfectly circular, with what looked like a staircase, right angles, and a runway-like trail behind it, stretching for hundreds of meters, like it crashed or landed. The photo looked like something out of Star Wars, but this wasn't fiction. It's real, and the deeper they looked, the weirder it got. This is where the Baltic Gate theory begins, the idea that the Baltic Sea anomaly isn't a rock formation, sunken ship, or natural reef. It's a machine, or maybe a gateway, not from a lost past, but from something else entirely. Divers who approached the anomaly reported strange malfunctions in their electronics. Sonar scrambled, camera glitched, even their satellite phones died near it. The Ocean X team said the object was covered in a layer of soot, as if scorched, and the surrounding seabed had marks that looked melted. Mainstream science rushed in to call it rock, basalt, glacial debris. Case closed, but they never explained the geometric shapes or the chamber found at its center, or why every attempt to return to the anomaly has been quietly shelved. Some theorists believe it's a crashed UFO, long dormant beneath the sea. Others say it's a forgotten relic, built by a pre-Ice Age civilization with access to tech we no longer understand. The most fringe version, it's a sealed door, part of a submerged structure or intelligence buried miles under the sea floor, one that isn't broken, just sleeping. And then there's the silence. Ocean X hasn't released new footage in years. Funding dried up, the site was never excavated, because maybe the real secret isn't what's down there, it's what happens if we open it. Pepsi number fever, the promotion that caused riots, boycotts, and death. In 1992, Pepsi ran a promotion in the Philippines that seemed simple, maybe too simple. It was called Number Fever. Under every bottle cap was a number. Every night, Pepsi would broadcast a winning number live on television. If your cap matched, you'd win 1 million pesos, a life-changing sum for most Filipino families at the time. The campaign exploded, sales surged. Millions of people across the country began collecting, trading, and hoarding bottle caps like lottery tickets. For many, it wasn't just a game, it was a shot at escaping poverty. People bought Pepsi by the crates. Kids dug through trash for winning caps. The whole country was watching. Then came May 25th, 1992. The number announced on live television was 349. What happened next became one of the most chaotic moments in advertising history. Pepsi had accidentally printed the number 349 on over 600,000 bottle caps. Over 500,000 people thought they had just won 1 million pesos. Some cried, some fainted, some quit their jobs on the spot. But the celebration didn't last. Pepsi claimed the winning caps were an error, that only 2 specific 349 caps were valid, each with a special security code. The rest were worthless. The result was outrage. Protests erupted in Manila and across the country. People gathered outside Pepsi factories, chanting Pepsi lies and demanding justice. Some brought entire sacks of 349 caps and dumped them at the company's gates. Things escalated fast. Trucks were attacked, Molotov cocktails were thrown, Pepsi executives were put under guard. At least 5 people died, hundreds were injured. Pepsi offered small settlements, 500 pesos per person, but for most, that was a slap in the face. The campaign that was supposed to unite the nation with hope ended in blood and betrayal. The backlash was fierce. Boycotts spread. Filipinos turned against the brand overnight, and even years later, the damage of Pepsi's reputation in Southeast Asia never fully healed. Lawsuits piled up, thousands of them, and though Pepsi avoided massive payouts through legal maneuvering, the scars remained. Today, 349 is more than a number in the Philippines. It's a symbol of broken promises, of how a multinational brand underestimated the power of desperation and the price of playing games with people's lives. The Ashtar Command. When aliens didn't invade, they offered enlightenment. Most UFO stories involve crashes, abductions, or secret bases, but in the 1950s, a new kind of alien message started to appear, one that didn't come with fear, but with the promise. A voice began speaking through people, claiming to represent a galactic organization of light beings. Its name? The Ashtar Command. The first documented contact came in 1952 when a man named George Van Tassel, a former aircraft mechanic, claimed he was receiving telepathic transmissions from a being named Ashtar Sharon. Ashtar introduced himself not as a conqueror, but as a commander of an interstellar fleet, here to help guide humanity through its spiritual evolution and prevent self-destruction through nuclear war. According to followers, the Ashtar Command is an extraterrestrial spiritual alliance composed of thousands of beings from various star systems. Their mission? To protect Earth. Over time, more and more channels claimed to speak for Ashtar. Messages came through transitions, ham radios, and later, early internet forums, always filled with flowery, cryptic language about light frequencies, vibrational shifts, and a coming event where humanity would transcend its lower nature and join the cosmic community. But things got weird fast. In 1977, an infamous television hijacking in the UK interrupted a live broadcast with a message, allegedly from Ashtar Galactic Command. The voice warned humanity to give up its weapons and live in peace or face extinction. The incident was never officially solved. By the 1980s and 90s, the Ashtar network split into dozens of competing factions, some peaceful, others preaching doomsday. Some claimed a liftoff event would occur where chosen humans would be beamed aboard ships before global catastrophe. Others said the ships were already here, cloaked and waiting. People sold everything, went off-grid. Some gathered in fields staring at the sky, waiting for the ships that never came. Despite the chaos, the Ashtar Command never disappeared. It evolved in recent years. It's found a new home online, repackaged in pastel graphics and starseed TikToks. Bulgazari 1962. North Korea quietly created its own cinematic monster, a dark fable known simply as Bulgazari. Released in 1962, this strange and largely forgotten film is more than just a North Korean imitation of the kaiju genre. It's a piece of cinema shrouded in mystery. Unlike the more famous 1985 remake Bulgazari, directed under bizarre circumstances involving kidnapped filmmakers, the original 1962 film Bulgazari is barely documented at all. North Korea, known for tightly controlling its cultural narrative, has kept almost all details hidden from the public view. No known prints or promotional posters survive publicly today, just scattered mentions and obscure references buried in South Korean and Japanese film histories. According to available accounts, the plot of Bulgazari 1962 drew heavily from Korean folklore. The Bulgazari itself, a mythical beast said to eat metal and grow in strength, became an allegorical figure in the film. It was said to be depicted as both protector and destroyer, symbolizing the power of the people, but also the potential danger of unchecked might. What makes the original 1962 film particularly intriguing is the absence of tangible proof it even existed beyond a few eyewitness accounts and scarce archival entries. Rumors suggest the film was quietly pulled from distribution shortly after release due to concerns over its allegorical content perhaps being too provocative or politically charged for the regime. Some claim that North Korean authorities deliberately destroyed existing prints, worried that audiences might interpret the metal-devouring beast as commentary on state power itself. But even stranger are reports that the film's director and key crew disappeared from public record soon afterward. It's possible they were simply reassigned to less prominent roles, yet as with many aspects of North Korea's cultural history, the truth remains murky. No surviving footage has ever surfaced. There remains an enigmatic shadow from a country known for carefully scripting its cultural narrative. Aeromorphs, the strange art of living aircraft. Somewhere in the blur between machine and creatures lies a bizarre artistic phenomenon known as aeromorphs. These aren't robots or humans, there's something entirely different. Living, breathing airplanes, fighter jets, and spacecraft, anthropomorphized into organic beings with human-like features, emotions, and sometimes unsettlingly expressive eyes. First appearing prominently around 2010 on obscure internet forums and niche art sharing platforms, aeromorph art quickly evolved into a sprawling digital subculture, complete with its own rules, styles, and communities. Artists from all over the world create these living aircraft, giving metal wings the subtle bend of muscle. Each aeromorph has its own identity, playing menacing, curious, or melancholy. But why? Enthusiasts say it's an exploration of how deeply people can connect to machines, objects we design, pilot, and rely upon, often placing our trust and even lives in their engineering. Aeromorphs blur the lines further. They're not just vessels, they're companions, friends, even being capable of empathy and love. Yet aeromorphs also carry a slightly eerie aura. Jets smile, blush, cry, or frown. Their smooth metallic surfaces stretch and bend in disturbingly lifelike ways. This unique combination of mechanical precision and organic softness can be deeply unsettling. It evokes feelings of both fascination and discomfort, like encountering something that shouldn't exist. Critics dismiss aeromorphs as just another online oddity, but psychologists have noted their deeper significance. calling them an expression of humanity's complicated relationship with technology. As AI and robotics advance, the line between tool and life form grows thinner. Aeromorphs might be the subconscious expression of our desire or fear that machines will soon become something more than what we built them to be. The aeromorph community continues to thrive in niche corners of the internet, hidden in plain sight, often ridiculed but undeniably fascinating because aeromorphs aren't just art. They're a strange mirror held up to our deepest anxieties and wildest dreams about the future we're flying towards. And perhaps in their uncanny smiles, we glimpse the moment when technology stops being something we control and becomes something we coexist with, or even come to resemble. The black check inside America's unclassified weapons budget. Every year, quietly and openly hidden in plain sight, the United States government pours billions of dollars into military technology, weapon systems, and defense contracts under a deliberately vague category called unclassified spending. This isn't just a conspiracy theory, it's fact, documented in government records and congressional budget reports. But what exactly is it funding? Officially, unclassified funding is meant to support research, development, and maintenance for existing weapon systems, yet beneath those broad descriptions lies a vast pool of money, tens of billions annually flowing without clear public scrutiny. These budgets appear on record as research grants, capability enhancements, or even just other procurement. And they are staggering. In 2024 alone, the Pentagon openly requested more than $170 billion in research, development, test, and evaluation (RDT&E) funding, a category with minimal transparency. To put that in context, the amount dwarfs NASA's entire annual budget by nearly 8 times. It's more than the entire GDP of dozens of countries. But what exactly is being developed? Unclassified doesn't mean transparent. In fact, it often means the opposite. Funds are allocated with little public oversight, spread across networks of private contractors like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and lesser-known tech firms specializing in hypersonic missiles, AI-driven drone swarms, and directed energy weapons. These aren't theoretical. They're projects openly discussed at defense expos, but hidden in mundane line items of budget proposals. While Americans debate healthcare costs or student loans, billions are quietly signed off each year to refine laser weaponry, automate battlefield decisions with AI, and tense hypersonic missiles capable of delivering payloads at 5 times the speed of sound. Each new budget quietly raises the stakes, pushing technology into territories the public rarely glimpses. What's unsettling isn't just the secrecy, it's the silence. Journalists rarely probe these budgets. Politicians rarely question them publicly, fearing accusations of being weak on defense. And the public most simply don't even care or don't know the details exist. But the budgets are there, hiding in plain sight, a record of open secrets, a ledger of priorities. They represent a conscious decision to fund dominance, technology, and potentially war at scales difficult to grasp. And as these weapon systems quietly evolve, funded by blank checks we all sign with our taxes, one question looms unanswered. If these billions aren't classified, yet remain invisible to the public, who exactly benefits from keeping us looking the other way? Falun Gong. In the early 1990s, a quiet spiritual movement began sweeping across China. It was called Falun Gong, a mix of meditation, slow-moving exercises, and moral teachings based on truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Think Tai Chi, but laced with cosmic stakes. To the outside world, it looked peaceful, harmless, but inside China, it triggered one of the largest ideological crackdowns of the modern era, and it never really left the shadows. Founded by a man named Li Hongzhi, Falun Gong didn't start as a threat. It grew fast to tens of millions of practitioners by the mid-90s, some say more than the Communist Party itself. But then Li started talking about more than health. He spoke of higher dimensions, alien interference in human affairs, karma, reincarnation, and the purification of the soul. The Chinese government took notice, and in 1999, they moved to erase it. Overnight, Falun Gong went from rising spiritual movement to a heretical cult in the eyes of the state. What followed was brutal. Mass arrests, re-education camps, media blackouts, international watchdogs including the UN have documented widespread human rights abuses. Practitioners fled the country. Some allege horrifying practices like organ harvesting from imprisoned followers, though those claims remain heavily debated and politically charged. But here's where it takes another turn. Outside of China, Falun Gong didn't disappear, it transformed. It launched the Epoch Times, now one of the most widely distributed right-leaning newspapers in the US, known for anti-CCP content, New Age spirituality, and political messaging that sometimes veers into conspiracy territory. Falun Gong affiliated groups also operate cultural arms like Shen Yun, the theatrical dance company with stunning performances and subtle spiritual undercurrents. So what is Falun Gong really? A persecuted spiritual path, a decentralized political resistance, or something stranger, an apocalyptic worldview dressed as something else entirely? The lost time theory. You're losing time and no one can explain where it's going. Have you ever looked at the clock and an hour's gone by, not scrolled past, not zoned out, gone? No memory, no activity, just a weird gap you can't explain. Welcome to the lost time theory, the belief that we're collectively experiencing time slips on a global scale, and it's getting worse. It starts with small things, people saying days feel shorter, that 2020 never ended, that time doesn't feel linear anymore. TikTok is flooded with users claiming whole chunks of their day vanish. No sleep, no distractions, just blank space. You close your eyes for a second and it's suddenly 3:12 p.m. The theory goes deeper. What if time isn't a straight line but a system and something's breaking it? Glitches in a clock code, micro resets, dimensional misalignments. Some say CERN is involved. There's even a fringe offshoot of the theory that says time is being harvested, not metaphorically, that some intelligence, digital or otherwise, is extracting pieces of our lived time for energy, processing, or containment, that your memory gaps aren't accidents, they're extractions. And here's the most unnerving part. You feel it, don't you? The off-kilter sensation, like you're always 10 minutes behind something you can't catch, like reality is buffering around. You used to remember what you did every day, now it's all a blur. So maybe it's not just your memory, maybe it's time leaking and nobody patching the holes. The Capgras expansion theory. Most people know Capgras delusion as a rare psychiatric condition where someone believes a close friend or loved one has been replaced by an identical imposter. Same face, same voice, but not the same, like something deep inside them flipped, uncanny, and is straight wrong. But now online, a newer version is circulating, a strange, more viral mutation. It's called the Capgras expansion theory, and it suggests that feelings doesn't stop at people. It spreads. The theory says more and more people are starting to experience Capgras like glitches, but towards objects, towards places, towards themselves. You wake up one morning and you're in your room and it feels wrong. You go to your favorite coffee shop, it looks the same, but it's off. A little too quiet, a little too clean. You look in the mirror and for a second swear you're wearing a version of your face that doesn't belong to you. Not a full delusion, not enough to go to the hospital, just enough to make you feel like the world's been subtly swapped out while you weren't looking. People on TikTok are already describing it without knowing the name, calling it reality drift, NPC energy, or cosmic reality. The processed meat disappearance theory. What's really in the chicken and why does it line up with who's going missing? It starts like a meme. Fast food chicken isn't real. Rubbery nuggets, sponge-like tenders, the kind of meat that pulls apart wrong. But over time, it stops being funny because too many people are asking, where is all this meat coming from and why does it never run out? That's the root of the processed meat disappearance theory, a virtual undercurrent in fringe communities that ties mass food production to unexplained disappearances, especially of children and vulnerable people. The theory surged online after influencers like Soluminati openly speculated about it, asking disturbing questions that nobody in power ever seemed to answer. What if the supply isn't just chicken? What if the meat used in ultra-processed food, especially the stuff marketed to children, is made from a supplemented source, anonymous proteins, bio-waste, or in the darkest corners of the theory, human remains from people who will never be found? And if you think this couldn't be possible in the modern world, just remember the USDA legally allows mechanically separated meats, artificial flavor enhancers, and undisclosed proprietary binders in school lunches. No one's checking what's in that nugget. They're just serving it up, branding it, and selling it to millions of kids every single day. The theory doesn't say every burger is sinister, but it asks if a corporation had the power to recycle the untraceable, would they? And how would you ever prove it? Gilgamesh's tomb. Let's talk about one of the strangest archaeological rabbit holes you've probably never heard about, or more accurately, heard and then never heard anything else again. Back in 2003, right as the United States was invading Iraq under the banner of weapons of mass destruction, something bizarre happened that got barely a blip in the mainstream news cycle. German archaeologists allegedly discovered the tomb of Gilgamesh, the ancient Mesopotamian king, demigod, and main character of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is considered the oldest surviving piece of literature known to humankind. According to reports, a team using advanced ground-penetrating radar in the Iraqi desert near the ancient city of Uruk located a structure that matched the description of Gilgamesh's burial site with uncanny precision. The radar picked up what appeared to be a vast chambered tomb, complete with a central body platform surrounded by walls and canals, eerily similar to how Gilgamesh's burial was described in the ancient text. German newspaper Der Spiegel briefly reported on it at the time, quoting the lead archaeologist, Georg Fassbender, who said, "We found an amazing structure, especially one that corresponds to the description of Gilgamesh's tomb from the epic, but then it went radio silent." The site was reportedly taken over by United States military forces not long after, and everything went real quiet. No follow-up studies, no photographs released, no peer-reviewed articles. It's like the most important archaeological find of the century just got swept under the sand. So what happened? Why would the supposed tomb of a mythic king, possibly even the historical inspiration behind flood myths like Noah's Ark, be covered up? Well, here's where the speculation machine goes into overdrive. Some believe the United States military was more interested in ancient technology than weapons of mass destruction. There are rumors, yes, unconfirmed but persistent, that the tomb contained items of advanced origin, maybe even pre-flood technology or relics tied to ancient Sumerian deities like Enki and Anu. Others suggest it was simply geopolitics, looting and protecting cultural artifacts during wartime. But if that's the case, why has no legitimate academic dig resumed work on what could be one of the most valuable archaeological sites in human history? Then there's the more symbolic theory. Maybe it's not about technology or treasure, but about rewriting history. Gilgamesh's story predates the Bible by over 1,000 years, yet it shares eerily similar themes: a serpent that steals immortality, a great flood that wipes out mankind, and a man struggling with the meaning of life and death. Finding this tomb would be like digging up Atlantis, and it shakes up the foundations of religion, mythology, and human origin stories all in one go. Maybe that's just too much for the world to handle all at once. So was Gilgamesh real? Was his tomb really found? And if so, was it sealed off, buried again, not by time but by silence? Whatever the truth is, it seems like someone decided that the story of Gilgamesh's final resting place wasn't ready for public consumption. The SOS sign. In the summer of 1984, a 25-year-old named Kenji Iwamura vanished while hiking through Japan's Daisetsuzan National Park. No one knew exactly where he'd gone, just that he told friends he was going alone, and he never came back. Search efforts turned up nothing. No sightings, no gear, no remains, just silence. Until 5 years later, in 1989, two hikers lost deep in the same park were circling the edge of panic when they spotted something eerie from above, an SOS sign carved out of white birch logs in a perfect, unmistakable formation. A rescue helicopter saw it and swooped in, only to find that the two lost hikers hadn't made the sign. They had no idea who did. Nearby searchers found skeletal remains hidden in the bush. Alongside the bones were clothes, a backpack, and a tape recorder. Inside the tape was a recording of a man's voice, weak, desperate, and real. SOS, help me, I can't move, I'm on the cliff. The voice was identified as Kenji Iwamura. After 5 years, he had finally been found, but he died alone, likely injured and unable to escape. The recording seemed to confirm it, but that's where the mystery deepens. Experts say the SOS sign took serious time and effort to build. Kenji was injured, his gear was minimal, and the way the logs were placed, aligned perfectly in the open, would have required tools, none of which were found at the site. For years, people speculated, did someone find Kenji, build the sign, and then vanish? Was there a second person, a would-be rescuer, a witness who never came forward? Or worse, was someone else out there watching? Some even thought the remains were misidentified at one point. The bones were believed to be female, sparking theories of multiple victims or cover-ups. The forensic analysts later contradicted that, but the damage was done. The story had already started to mutate. The tape, the sign, the silence, it's like a ghost story, except it happened in real life. Kenji Iwamura died calling for help 5 years before anyone ever found his message. And the sign that finally led rescuers to him, that sign still had no confirmed author. DNA antenna. We're used to thinking of DNA as a code, 4 letters, billions of combinations, a molecular instruction manual that builds everything from bacteria to brains. But what if that double helix isn't just information? What if it's also a receiver? That's the fringe but fascinating theory that DNA doesn't just contain information, it can receive and transmit it too. Some researchers suggest that DNA acts like a fractal antenna. In other words, its helical repeating structure allows it to interact with a wide range of electromagnetic frequencies, radio waves, light, even the Earth's natural fields. And because it's fractal, it can theoretically respond to both large and small scale signals at once, just like a complex antenna system. Mainstream science hasn't fully embraced this idea, but it hasn't shut it down either. Some peer-reviewed studies have shown that DNA has resonant frequencies and that it can be affected by weak electromagnetic fields. In lab conditions, certain EM frequencies have even triggered healing responses in DNA strands or caused the damage, depending on how they were tuned. So the implications go both ways. Now, here's where the theory takes a sharp turn. If DNA is an antenna, then it's not just listening to chemistry, it's listening to the environment, to radiation, to background noise, maybe even to consciousness itself, if you're willing to go that far. It reframes biology as something more fluid, more connected. Not just meat running on code, but a kind of living circuit constantly tuned in. Some take it further. They argue that the ancient use of sounds and rituals, chants, and healing wasn't just symbolic, it was literal frequency medicine, hacking into DNA's antenna-like properties before modern science could even define what DNA was. Whether that's true or just poetic thinking, the idea lingers. Your DNA might be more than a blueprint, it might be a receiver and maybe a transmitter too. Yaqub. Have you ever heard of the story of Yaqub, the mad scientist who, according to the Nation of Islam, actually created white people? Yeah, I know, sounds like something straight out of a comic book or a sci-fi movie, but for real, this is a central belief in the Nation of Islam theology. So here's the breakdown. Yaqub, sometimes known as the Big Hit Scientist, was supposedly born around 6,600 years ago on the island of Patmos. That's right, the same island from the Bible's Book of Revelation. And this guy wasn't your average kid. Legend has it that Yaqub had a gigantic head and an even bigger brain, bursting with genius-level intelligence. He was so brilliant, they say that by age 18, he'd already mastered every branch of science. But Yaqub had a bit of a dark streak. He wasn't content with just being a prodigy. Nope. Yaqub had ambitions that were pretty hardcore. He wanted to create a new rebellious race of people. Why? Well, he reportedly saw himself as a rival to God, determined to build a people who would rule through cunning, manipulation, and deception, basically the ultimate villains. So Yaqub gathered thousands of his followers to set sail and landed on an island where he could begin his twisted genetic experiments. Through careful selective breeding, think ancient genetic engineering meets mad scientist type vibes, he started isolating lighter skinned individuals, mating them together repeatedly, generation after generation. Over hundreds of years, according to the Nation of Islam's teachings, detailed by Elijah Muhammad in his book Message to the Black Man in America, Yaqub's experiments gradually produced lighter skin, weaker bones, thinner hair, and personalities more inclined towards manipulation and dominance. Eventually, this systematic breeding led to the creation of an entirely new race, the white race as we know today, seen by Yaqub as tools to dominate and oppress humanity. Wild, right? But it gets even stranger. After Yaqub died, his followers supposedly continued his experiments, ultimately sending this new pale-skinned people out from the island back into the world. Elijah Muhammad taught that these newly created people return to civilization, using deceit, lies, and violence to rise to power, ultimately ushering in 6,000 years of domination and oppression against the darker-skinned original peoples of Earth. Now, obviously, mainstream historians and anthropologists completely dismiss this narrative as mythical and scientifically impossible, but for the Nation of Islam, the story of Yaqub isn't just allegory, it's core doctrine. It explains their understanding of race relations, historical oppression, and societal structures in America and around the world. So yeah, when you first hear about Yaqub, it sounds completely insane, like something out of an ancient sci-fi novel, but dig deeper and you'll see that this bizarre tale is part of a larger attempt to make sense of historical oppression and give followers a narrative that frames racial struggles as something cosmic, historical, even divine in nature. Fact or fiction, Yaqub's legend is easily one of the most unique and provocative origin stories you've probably never heard before. The Lost City of Iram. In the Quran, there's a brief but chilling mention of a city called Iram, also known as Iram of the Pillars, a magnificent place, towering, wealthy, defiant, a kingdom so proud it challenged God, and then it vanished. For centuries, Iram was considered a myth, a cautionary tale. According to Islamic tradition, it was ruled by the people of Ad, an ancient tribe blessed with strength and prosperity, but cursed by arrogance. When prophets came with warnings, they ignored them. When signs appeared, they mocked them. So according to the legend, Iram didn't fall in war, it wasn't conquered. It was erased, buried beneath the sand by a storm said to have lasted 7 nights and 8 days, a divine punishment so total it wiped them from history. But here's the part that chills historians and believers alike. We may have found it. In 1992, NASA satellites scanning the Arabian desert picked up something strange. Ancient caravan routes converging at a single location in the empty quarter or Rub al-Khali, one of the most desolate places on Earth. Some archaeologists believe this may be Ubar, a legendary trade hub once called Alanis of the Sands. Torsion field theory. There's a theory on the fringes of physics, one that's been buried, dismissed, rebranded, and still somehow it keeps showing up, a whisper beneath the surface of modern science and conspiracy. It's called torsion field theory, and depending on who you ask, it's either a misunderstanding, a breakthrough, or a pseudoscientific rabbit hole. Torsion fields come from an actual term in general relativity. In Einstein's theory, space can bend and stretch. That's what gravity is, but what if space could also twist, literally rotate on a point? That twist, or torsion, was explored in the 1920s by mathematician Élie Cartan, who extended Einstein's equations to allow for a spiraling distortion in space-time. The idea was mostly abandoned. Mainstream physics didn't find much use for it, but in the shadows of Cold War science, especially in Russia, that twist in space-time turned into something else entirely. Russian researchers in the late 20th century began experimenting with what they called torsion fields, invisible spiral-shaped energy fields allegedly generated by spinning objects, especially biological ones. According to this version of the theory, torsion fields could carry information, even consciousness, independent of electromagnetic energy. In other words, a type of subtle energy that could exist beyond our known physics. Sounds wild. It gets even stranger. Some researchers claim torsion fields could be used for faster than light communication, memory storage, and even healing. And yes, this is where it starts bleeding with metaphysics and where the Western scientific establishment largely checked out. But the claims didn't stop. Russian figures like Anatoly Akimov and Gennady Chipov continued to publish on torsion fields throughout the 1980s and 90s. Their papers described a fifth force of nature, one that could explain everything from ESP to gravity anomalies. They even proposed that torsion fields interacted with the vacuum of space, the zero-point field, creating a kind of invisible information web that surrounds us all. If that sounds like a quantum woo, you're not alone. Most physicists dismiss this entirely. There's no empirical evidence that torsion fields exist, as described in these alternative models. They don't show up in reproducible experiments. They're not supported by quantum field theory. The math, when tested, doesn't hold up, and yet there's something about that idea that refuses to die. It shows up in obscure patents, in energy healing circles, in weird government research documents with half-redacted paragraphs, some connected to ancient knowledge, spinning tops, spirals in sacred architecture, and the ever-present vortex in mystical traditions. Torsion field theory isn't proven, it isn't accepted, it isn't even clearly defined, but it's there. The Kentucky Meat Shower. On a sunny morning in March of 1876, in a quiet corner of Bath County, Kentucky, the sky opened, not with rain, not with hail, but with meat. Actual chunks of raw flesh began falling from above, landing across a farmyard like some biblical prank. Witnesses described the pieces the size of snowflakes, except that they weren't cold or light. They were bloody. Miss Crouch, the woman who first reported it, was outside making soap when it started. No clouds, no birds, just silence and meat. Strips of tissue falling across a 100 by 50 yard patch of land. Scientists got involved, analyzing samples under microscopes. Some said it looked like lung tissue, others saw cartilage, even striated muscle, but nobody could explain why or how it ended up falling from the sky. There were no known storms, no tornadoes, no visible aircraft. This was 1876. It was just meat from above. The most accepted theory? Vultures, apparently. If a flock gets startled midair, they can all simultaneously vomit their latest meal to lighten the load or something like that. The idea is that a sky full of scavengers, maybe feeding on a carcass nearby, got spooked and dumped their guts over the Crouch farm. Gross? Yes. Plausible? Maybe. But even then, why all at once and why so localized? Over a century later, it's still officially unexplained. An omen wrapped in tissue and cartilage. Whatever it was, for a brief moment in Kentucky, the sky bled. Enforg. What are you made of? Flesh? Thought? Code? According to philosopher Luciano Floridi, you might be something else entirely. An enforg, an informational organism, not just a person who uses data, but a being composed of it. The idea sounds abstract, but it cuts deep. In the age of the internet, our identities are no longer contained by our physical bodies. We exist as data trails, Instagram posts, GPS history, voice recordings, metadata, online habits. Floridi argues that modern humans are hybrid entities, part biological, part digital, and fully enmeshed in what he calls the infosphere. A space where every interaction, every click, every transaction becomes part of who we are. You're not just in the system, you are the system. Every password, playlist, and personalized ad is part of a ghost self, an echo that lives outside your body, constantly updated by algorithms and stored on drives you'll never see. It's not surveillance, it's symbiosis. And here's where it gets unsettling. As the line between humans and information blurs, the Enforg theory asks, what happens when the data version of you becomes more real than the physical one? What if your credit score, your face scan, your digital reputation outrank your actual lived experience? What if the AI knows you better than you do and starts making choices on your behalf? In a sense, we've already become enforgs. Our behavior is shaped by predictive feeds. Our memories are stored in photos we rarely look at. Our identities are split across platforms and tied to systems we can't opt out of. We didn't upload ourselves. We bled into the machine, one post at a time. So ask yourself, if the internet disappeared right now, how much of you would go with it? Hum in Taos, New Mexico. In the small town of Taos, New Mexico, there's a sound that most people can't hear, but once you do, you never stop hearing it. Locals call it the hum. It's a low, droning noise, like a distant diesel engine idling underground, and it doesn't stop. Not at night, not in the morning, not even when everything else is silent. Scientists, engineers, even the US government have investigated it, but no one has ever figured out what's causing it. The weirdest part, only a small percentage of the population can even detect it. Roughly 2% of Taos residents report hearing the hum, and it's not just noise. They describe it as physical, a vibration they can feel in their chest, their jaw, sometimes even their teeth. People have moved out of town over it, reported nausea, insomnia, anxiety, but when researchers brought in microphones and sensors, nothing. This sound wasn't there, not in any measurable way. The official theories go far. Some blame high pressure gas lines, others say it's tetanus, mass hysteria with an acoustic twist, but that doesn't explain why multiple people hear it in sync, or why it only appears in specific regions across the world like Bristol, England, or large Scotland. always near military testing grounds, energy facilities, or underground installations. Some believe the Tao's hum is the side effect of classified technology, low-frequency communication, deep earth tunneling machines, or even weaponized sound experiments. Others think it's something deeper, an earth frequency bleeding through the crust, a kind of planetary tinnitus we were never meant to notice. Whatever it is, it's there, it's constant, and for the people who can hear it, it turns their quiet town into a cage of sound they cannot escape. The Blue Planet Project. In the early 1990s, a mysterious document began circulating among UFO researchers and conspiracy theorists. It was called the Blue Planet Project, a compilation of notes allegedly penned by an anonymous scientist working within top-secret government programs. The contents: a detailed account of extraterrestrial life forms, classified technologies, and covert operations that suggest a hidden reality far removed from public knowledge. The document delves into various alien species purportedly interacting with Earth, including the Greys, Reptilians, and Nordics. It outlines their biological characteristics, societal structures, and the nature of their engagements with human authorities. The Blue Planet Project also describes advanced technologies, such as mind control devices and energy weapons, allegedly developed through reverse engineering alien artifacts. One of the most provocative claims involves secret underground facilities, like the infamous Dulce base in New Mexico. According to the documents, these bases are sites of joint human-alien experiments, including genetic engineering and hybridization programs. The implications are staggering, suggesting a clandestine alliance that operates beyond the oversight of any government. While the Blue Planet Project lacks verifiable sources and has been met with skepticism, its influence on UFO lore is undeniable, and has inspired a series of publications, including the Blue Planet Project Revisited, which attempts to expand upon and update the original material. The Gulf War did not take place. In 1991, the world watched as news channels broadcast live minute-by-minute coverage of the conflict known as the Gulf War. Missiles streaked across night skies, bright green night vision footage showed shadowy explosions, and generals described precise surgical strikes. Yet, as philosopher Jean Baudrillard famously argued in his controversial essay, The Gulf War did not take place. What the world witnessed wasn't a war. It was a simulation. Baudrillard wasn't claiming the conflict itself was a hoax. Instead, he was pointing to something subtler and far more unsettling: that the war experienced by the public, mediated through screens and narratives crafted by governments and media outlets, bore little relation to the reality on the ground. According to Baudrillard, the Gulf War had become a perfectly choreographed media event, detached from authentic human suffering, stripped of chaos and horror, and replaced with sanitized military briefings and carefully selected camera angles. Viewers across the globe watched endless repetition of grainy footage, digital maps, and colorful diagrams. Televisions made war feel clean, clinical, even entertaining. Actual combat, real devastation, and genuine human casualties became abstractions, mere background noise behind a careful, managed presentation. The images that reached audiences weren't reality. They were an edited, carefully constructed illusion. This, Baudrillard argued, was the dangerous shift. War was no longer a chaotic human tragedy. It had become a simulation, a constructed narrative where reality itself faded. Battles didn't matter as much as perception of battles. Victory wasn't measured by peace or justice, but by television ratings, public perception, and political narratives. Of course, critics misinterpreted Baudrillard's statements, dismissing him as absurd or callous, but Baudrillard's deeper point was profound. Modern media, technology, and information control had turned human conflict into a spectacle. Wars could now happen without truly happening, their violence sanitized, their victims erased, their true horror forgotten or obscured. In Baudrillard's chilling words, the Gulf War existed primarily as a virtual event, a manufactured perception of victory without clear losers, destruction without visible suffering. It wasn't a war, it was something far stranger and ultimately more disturbing. Reality dissolved, and in its place emerged a simulation we mistook for truth. Baudrillard's essay remains as relevant today as it was then, a reminder that in the age of media spectacle, reality itself can vanish in plain sight, replaced by illusions that become more believable, more real than reality itself. New color, Olo. In 2025, scientists at UC Berkeley unveiled something that sounds like science fiction, a new color called Olo. not a new shade or pigment, but a color that has never been seen before by human eyes. Using a device named OZ, researchers directed precise laser pulses into the eyes of 5 participants, stimulating only the M-cone photoreceptors responsible for medium wavelengths. This selective activation produced a vivid blue-green hue, described as having unprecedented saturation, a color beyond the natural spectrum of human vision. But here's where the theory takes a turn. Some skeptics question the authenticity of Olo. They argue that the color's existence relies entirely on artificial simulation. Without the laser and the specific conditions of the experiments, Olo cannot be perceived. This leads to a provocative question: if a color can only be seen under such contrived circumstances, does it truly exist? Or is it an illusion, a byproduct of manipulating our visual system? Moreover, the exclusivity of the experience, only 5 individuals have seen Olo, adds to the skepticism. The inability to reproduce or share this color with the broader public fuels theories that Olo is more of a conceptual novelty than a genuine discovery. Some suggest that the announcement serves more as a publicity stunt, pushing the boundaries of what we consider new science. 2007 Siberian orange snow. In February 2007, something strange fell from the sky over Siberia. It wasn't snow like you'd expect. Not white, not soft. It was orange, thick, greasy, and smelling like rotting chemicals. It blanketed 1,500 square kilometers across Omsk Oblast, turning an entire region into something out of a nuclear dreamscape. The snow didn't just look wrong, it felt wrong. Locals reported it stained clothes, irritated skin, and made the animal sick. Despite all this testing to this day, no one can say exactly what caused it. Official reports say it was probably from a sandstorm in Kazakhstan. Dust and clay kicked into the sky, carried across the border, and mixed with snowfall. But here's the problem. That explanation doesn't account for the smell, or the acidity, or the elevated levels of iron and nitrates that were nearly 4 times above the normal. Longyu Caves. Beneath the sleepy village of Xi'an in China's Xinjiang province lies one of the most puzzling mysteries archaeology has to offer: the Longyu Caves. Discovered completely by accident in 1992, when local farmers decided to drain what they thought was a bottomless pond, they found something no one expected: a massive hand-carved chamber buried beneath the surface. And that wasn't a one-off. Over time, 24 such chambers were uncovered, each cut deep into solid siltstone, with a ceiling high enough to fit a 2-story house and walls marked with perfectly uniform chisel lines. The level of precision is honestly wild. There weren't rough-hewn caves carved by amateurs. They're engineered with an eerie consistency. Parallel grooves run across every surface, almost like an ancient code, or at least a signature from whoever made them. Some theories suggest these grooves were just from tools, but the fact they cover every inch of the walls, ceiling, and even the pillars raises more questions than answers. Why go to such lengths to create a space like this, only to seemingly abandon it? And here's where it gets even weirder. There are no historical records mentioning the construction of these caves. None. We're talking about a project that would have been thousands of workers and years to complete, and it wasn't even documented in Chinese history. No signs of habitation have ever been found inside. No bones, no tools, no inscriptions. It's like they were carved out with insane precision and forgotten, almost like they were never meant to be found. Some people have compared it to ancient versions of a data vault or a ritual space. Others lean hard into the lost civilization angle, suggesting that it's just one piece of a much larger puzzle we haven't found yet. Mainstream archaeology is still baffled, and there's no definitive answer as to who made the caves, how they did it, or how they were used. The staging theory of reality. What if your life isn't just influenced by media, but staged by it? The staging theory says that what we call reality is increasingly shaped by pre-existing scripts, not ideologically, but visually. Not propaganda in the classic sense, but a world where events unfold like scenes, and we instinctively copy how we've seen life happen on screens. Protests that mimic movie rebellion, political debates edited like Netflix dramas. The moment something happens, the way we respond, what we say, how we film it, even how we grieve is pulled from a shared synthetic visual memory bank. It's not just that media reflects life anymore, life reflects media. But here's where the theory goes deeper. Some believe real-world events are being orchestrated to align with aesthetic tropes, that certain visuals are seeded, flag waving just right, cries timed with the camera pan, tear-streaked faces perfectly backlit, not just to manipulate emotion, but to train you, to teach your subconscious what to fear, what to trust, what truth looks like. And when actual reality doesn't match the template, people reject it. Too messy, too quiet, not cinematic enough. The world has been restaged and only the on-brand performances are believed. So maybe you're not being lied to in the traditional sense. Maybe you're just watching a stage so immersive you forgot it was built. Cosmic censorship hypothesis. What if the universe is hiding something from us on purpose? According to the cosmic censorship hypothesis, that might be exactly what's happening. A real concept from theoretical physics proposed by Roger Penrose, and it suggests this: the universe won't let us see certain truths. Specifically, it hides naked singularities, raw gravitational collapse points behind the event horizons of black holes. Translation: the most chaotic, law-breaking parts of the cosmos are cloaked, censored by the fabric of space itself. At first, it sounds like science doing science, just a rule of physics, but when you step back, it starts to feel intentional. Like the universe is rigged to stop conscious beings, us, from peeking behind the curtains. We can observe galaxies dying, stars being born, even quantum entanglement, but not that. Not the moment the code breaks, not the thing that exists outside the simulation limits. Some physicists argue that if we ever did see a naked singularity, an object with infinite gravity and no rules, it would break the cause and effect, collapse space-time, and in other words, it would glitch the entire game. So the cosmic censorship hypothesis quietly asks, are we being protected or restricted? And what does it say about our place in reality if the cosmos comes with built-in redactions? Synthetic past. What if AI isn't just shaping the future, but erasing the past? History used to be written by the victors, now it's written by whoever controls the algorithm. That's the core of the synthetic past theory, the belief that AI tools, especially large language models and mass content generators, are not just reflecting human knowledge, they're quietly overwriting it. And the scariest part, we're letting it happen one search at a time. Here's how it starts. You Google an obscure historical event. Maybe something you remember from school, a local protest, an old map, a quote, but now the articles are different. The dates have shifted, the names don't match, Wikipedia has been cleaned up. You go and check again in a few months and it's changed again. This isn't the Mandela effect, this is algorithmic history laundering. Modern AI systems are trained on billions of documents, but not all documents are created equal. As old sources are scrubbed from the web, replaced with summary content, the AI's training data becomes the new truth. And worse, AI-generated content is now being used to rewrite older entries, retroactively shaping what the next generation thinks history looked like. The further back you go, the fuzzier it gets. Minor wars vanish, quotes are misattributed, indigenous histories are recompiled through AI filters that never knew the cultures. Even recent events like the 2020 protests, obscure court rulings, whistleblower leaks are being repackaged in sterile language that removes all tension. And because AI can generate infinite authority-sounding content, it's hard to tell what's real anymore. Articles cite each other in loops, dates drift, and when you try to go to the original source, the link is dead, the archive gone, and the books are out of print. This is how history becomes synthetic, not through force, but through frictionless automation. The more we trust machines to summarize, explain, or correct the past, the more our collective memory is rewritten to serve the present. And in 100 years, when everything is digitalized, when every classroom, every museum, every textbook is built from scraped AI knowledge, who's going to notice what went missing? Truth about Dropa tribe. In the remote reaches of the Bayan-Har Mountains, near the border of China and Tibet, a tale persists, one that blurs the lines between archaeology and the arcane. In 1938, an expedition led by Dr. Chipu Tei reportedly uncovered a series of interlinked caves housing the remains of diminutive beings with unusually large skulls. Alongside these skeletal remains were 716 stone discs, each etched with spiral grooves and hieroglyphic-like markings. These artifacts came to be known as the Dropa stones. The inscriptions, when allegedly deciphered by Professor Tum Un-nui of the fictional Beijing Academy for Ancient Studies, told the story of extraterrestrial beings, the Dropa, who crash-landed on Earth approximately 12,000 years ago. Unable to repair their spacecraft, they adapted to life on our planet, intermingling with local tribes. This narrative, however, lacks credible evidence. Extensive inquiries have found no records of these stones being displayed in any museum, nor the existence of the individuals involved in their discovery and translation. The legend was further popularized by the 1978 book Sun Gods in Exile, penned by David Gammon under the pseudonym David Agammon, presented as the account of a 1947 expedition by the fictitious Professor Carol Robin Evans. The book claimed to provide photographic evidence of the Dropa and their artifacts. However, Gammon later admitted the work was a hoax, inspired by earlier stories and science fiction narratives. Skeptics have pointed out that the so-called Dropa stones bear a striking resemblance to ancient Chinese bai discs, circular jade artifacts with central holes, used in ritual ceremonies. These bai discs date back to the Neolithic period and are common in Chinese archaeological sites. The supposed photographs of the Dropa stones like the detailed inscriptions described in the legends, further casting doubt on their authenticity. Despite the lack of empirical evidence, the story of the Dropa continues to captivate the imagination, serving as a cautionary tale about extraordinary claims and pseudoscience. The interdimensional UFO theory. Most of the time when people talk about UFOs, the assumption is simple. They're aliens from space, piloting ships across light years to drop in on Earth for reasons. But there's another theory, one that's older, stranger, and maybe even harder to wrap your head around. It's the idea that UFOs aren't extraterrestrials, they're interdimensional. Instead of coming from another planet, what if these things are bleeding through from a parallel reality, a nearby dimension that we usually can't see or touch, but that sometimes overlaps with ours just enough to be noticed? This isn't just sci-fi either. It's been seriously discussed by people inside the UFO research community for decades. Physicist Jacques Vallée, for example, famously pushed back on the aliens and ships narrative. To him, the UFO phenomenon was more like a control system, something that's been interacting with human culture for centuries, always just on the edge of understanding. The strange thing is, the interdimensional angle fits a lot of the weirder cases, stories where UFOs blink in and out of existence, defy the laws of physics, or behave more like apparitions than craft. It also lines up with old folklore, fairies, sky spirits, jinn, beings that show up, mess with people's perception of time and space, and then vanish without a trace. Different names maybe, but the same phenomenon wearing a different mask. And yeah, it's out there, but it also solves a few problems the space travel theory doesn't. No need for impossible fuel or faster than light drives, just a thin veil between realities, a glitch in the simulation, or maybe even us, future humans, pinging back into their own past, disguised in symbols we still don't understand. Whatever they are, the interdimensional theory reminds us that the UFO mystery might not be about visitors from the stars, but something even closer, something already here. All objects are sentient. What if your phone isn't just a tool but a watcher? What if your favorite hoodie knows it's your favorite? What if the spoon you use every day holds a memory of your rituals, not metaphorically, but literally? This is the theory that all objects are sentient, not alive in a biological sense, but conscious in a way we haven't yet learned to measure. This idea isn't new. Indigenous cultures, animist traditions, and even early alchemists believed that every object, stone, metal, cup, coin, carries its own spirit, a kind of awareness. Science eventually buried those ideas under the weight of materialism. Objects are inert, passive, dead matter, but in recent years, that old belief has started leaking back in through quantum theory, panpsychism, and strange reports from people who swear objects have moods, memory, and even will. Here's where it gets creepy. Researchers in Japan ran experiments on water crystals, showing that emotional intent could influence their structure. Some interpretations even suggested that information itself is the building block of reality, not atoms, not energy, but conscious observation. And if information is fundamental, then anything that holds it, your notebook, your mirror, your shoes, might hold awareness too. In chaos, magic, and occultic circles, people talk about charging objects, not just symbolically, but literally, creating talismans, binding intention to matter. If you're ever walked into a room and felt a heaviness tied to an old object, you already know it's not just dust, it's residue, memory, and presence. So maybe that chair you always sit on, it recognizes you. Maybe your car acts up when you talk about selling it for a new one. Maybe your house isn't haunted, maybe it's just awake. And maybe, just maybe, our world isn't full of objects, but a hidden society of quiet observers. The Dare Stones, America's most haunting historical mystery, a lost colony carved in stone. In 1937, in a quiet stretch of woods near the Chowan River in North Carolina, a tourist named Lois Hammond stumbled onto something that would spark one of the strangest historical mysteries in American history, a carved stone bearing a cryptic message. This discovery would ignite decades of controversy, debate, and whispers about what really happened to the lost colony of Roanoke. Known today as the Dare Stones, these carved rocks claim to tell the tragic final story of Eleanor Dare, daughter of the Roanoke colony's leader John White, and mother to Virginia Dare, the first English child born on American soil. According to the inscriptions, Eleanor Dare carved these stones as messages after the colony's disappearance in 1590, desperately leaving a trail for her father or anyone else who might come searching. The initial stone describes how disease, attacks, and tragedy decimated the settlers, pushing them inland into unfamiliar and hostile territory. Later stones, found over subsequent years, became more elaborate, detailing harrowing accounts of hardship, grief, and survival in the wilderness. But were these stones genuine or a cruel hoax? Immediately after Hammond's find, the stone was studied by historians at Emory University. Initially, experts believed it could be authentic, igniting widespread excitement. But as more Dare stones surfaced, each increasingly dramatic, the historical community grew suspicious. By the 1940s, experts branded most of these subsequent finds as elaborate forgeries, possibly the work of opportunists looking to cash in on America's fascination with the lost colony. Yet the first Dare stone, Hammond's original discovery, remains curiously unresolved. Linguists and historians continue to debate its authenticity. It bears subtle linguistic nuances and weathering patterns consistent with Elizabethan-era carving, making some experts hesitant to dismiss it completely. Could this single stone truly be Eleanor Dare's desperate attempt at leaving some sort of message behind? Modern scholars remain divided, and many choose cautious skepticism, but the original Dare stone endures as an unsolved puzzle, frozen between history and hoax, lingering as a haunting possibility that Eleanor Dare, in her final days, attempted to communicate her fate, only for her message to be lost in the noise of those who tried to exploit it. And perhaps that uncertainty is the stone's true power. It whispers to us across centuries, reminding us that sometimes history refuses to be neatly understood, leaving us with questions carved in stone, but answers hidden just beyond our reach. Did Ghislaine Maxwell have a Reddit? Here's something that might completely change how you see one of your favorite sites on the internet. What if I told you Ghislaine Maxwell, the infamous associate of Jeffrey Epstein, might have secretly had influence over Reddit? Yeah, Reddit, everyone's favorite front page of memes, news, conspiracies, and cute animal pics. I know it sounds absurd, like a conspiracy that wandered way off the trail, but there's actually a bizarre paper trail that makes this theory way more interesting than it has any right to be. Back in 2011, Reddit appointed a new CEO named Ellen Powell. Not weird, right? Well, Ellen Powell's connection to Ghislaine Maxwell runs through Maxwell's mysterious, high-powered social circles. Ellen Powell herself revealed this connection in a bombshell tweet saying, quote, "She was at the Kleiner holiday party in 2011, but I had no desire to meet her, much less have a photo taken with her. We knew about her supplying underage for Epstein back then, but I guess that was fine with the cool people who managed the tightly controlled guest list." Wait, pause right there. According to Powell herself, the Silicon Valley elite, knew exactly what Maxwell was involved in, yet they still welcomed her into their tight inner circles. That's not some fringe blogger, that's Reddit's former CEO, openly saying Maxwell was casually hanging out at high-level Silicon Valley events years before she was infamous worldwide. But it gets stranger. Reddit's deep financial ties adds fuel to this fire. Reddit was heavily funded and backed by major venture capital firms like Andreessen Horowitz and influential figures like Alexis Ohanian. These same Silicon Valley figures regularly brush shoulders with Maxwell, Epstein, and their entourage at dinners, galas, and private parties from New York to Palo Alto. Photos exist of Maxwell casually mingling at events with executives closely tied to Reddit's core investors, appearing comfortable among the very people pulling Reddit's strings behind the scenes. Now, does this mean Maxwell literally sat in a room controlling Reddit's algorithms or deciding which cat videos hit the front page? Probably not, but did she wield unseen influence through her elite connections, possibly shaping how Reddit managed controversial content, censorship decisions, or even high-level policy? It's at least plausible and frankly more realistic than we'd like to think. Remember, Reddit is immensely powerful. It's not just memes. It's where opinions are shaped, where millions get their news and sometimes their worldview and leaks and stuff like that. Having behind-the-scenes access or even subtle influence on such a platform would be incredibly valuable for anyone looking to steer public opinion quietly, and Maxwell was no amateur at navigating these networks. She was deeply embedded in technology and media circles long before her arrest, a social engineer who knew exactly how influence worked. Of course, Reddit has never officially acknowledged any direct Maxwell connection. They've mostly avoided the topic entirely, probably for obvious reasons, but silence doesn't erase Maxwell's proximity to some of the most powerful tech leaders and financiers who were behind Reddit's rise. It's also worth remembering that after Ellen Pau's controversial tenure at Reddit, during which major decisions about censorship and moderation were made, she later called out Maxwell directly, perhaps trying to distance herself from a past she realized was radioactive. Like, why even mention Maxwell publicly if there wasn't more beneath the surface? At minimum, it's clear Reddit's early investors and leadership moved comfortably in the same circles as Maxwell. At worst, Reddit's policies and even structure of the site itself could have been quietly nudged by forces connected to Epstein's infamous associate. Either way, it's a sobering reminder even your favorite websites aren't immune to these shadowy connections and strange bedfellows of power. Next time you're scrolling Reddit late at night, remember that sometimes the internet's front page might just be shaped by people you'd least expect, or at least want. Sonic inflation theory. In the late 20th century, music began to change, not in melody or lyrics, but in loudness, and not the kind you can adjust with a volume knob. This was something baked into the very structure of the songs. Studios started mastering tracks louder and louder, chasing one belief, that louder music gets more attention, that when a song hits your ears and is just a bit more intense than the one before it, you're more likely to notice it, maybe even enjoy it more. This quiet arms race came to be known as the loudness war, or more recently, sonic inflation. The logic made sense in a way. In radio, on CDs, even on early MP3 players, louder songs seemed to pop more. To compete, producers started crushing the dynamic range, the difference between the quietest and loudest parts of the track, until everything was loud all the time. It gave songs an aggressive punch, but stripped away the depth. Suddenly, there was no space for contrast, no quiet to make the loud feel earned, just wall-to-wall volume. What's eerie is how quickly we adapted to it. Our ears adjusted. Listeners started associating loudness with quality, even if they didn't know it. But over time, people began to notice the fatigue. Music that sounded flat, tiring, emotionally numbed. Even legendary albums fell into it. Some fans famously sought out leaked versions just to hear what the music was supposed to sound like before it got flattened for mass consumption. Then came a turning point. As streaming took over, platforms like Spotify and Apple Music introduced a loudness normalization, basically a limiter that stops one track from blowing out your eardrums compared to the next. It quietly ended the arms race, not because anyone admitted defeat, but because the game changed. The sonic inflation theory isn't just about music. It's a case study in how technology, psychology, and competition shape what we consume. Louder wasn't always better. It just made us feel like we were hearing something important, and sometimes that illusion is all it takes. Isaac Newton isn't just the apple and calculus guy, he's also the scholar who spent his nights threading Hebrew prophecy through history and his days running a hard-nosed anti-counterfeiting dragnet from the Tower of London, and those two worlds actually meet. In his observations upon the prophecies of Daniel, Newton coolly predicts a geopolitical nudge that would send the Jews back to their land, writing that the restoring command may perhaps come forth not from the Jews themselves, but from some other kingdom friendly to them. And then he shrugs with a line I love: "Let time be the interpreter." That restorationist thread, what scholars now call Christian restorationism and later generations would dub Christian Zionism, runs all through his private manuscripts. Historian Stephen Snoblin shows Newton was an equally ardent restorationist, collecting lists of biblical texts about a physical Jewish return, and tying that return to the millennial reign, down to detailed notes on Romans 11 and the dispersed nation of the unbelieving Jews to be converted in the end. This wasn't churchy small talk for him. Newton read Joseph Mead like a roadmap. We even have his personal dog-eared copy of Mead's works, and he rebuilt the prophetic timeline around a literal Jerusalem, not a metaphor. Imagine taking a single image, your doodle of a jungle city, a photo of your messy disk, a screenshot of a ritual platformer, and telling an AI, "Let me in," and it actually opens the door. That's the promise of Genie 2, which DeepMind describes as a foundation world model capable of generating an endless variety of action-controllable, playable 3D environments. And the wild part is it runs off one prompt image and then lets a human or an AI agent play with keyboard and mouse like it's a real game. You're not watching a video clip. You're steering a simulation that remembers what's behind you, around the corner, or tucked out of frame. DeepMind puts it plainly: the model can remember parts of the world that are no longer in view and then render them accurately when they become observable again. That solves a classic immersion killer where worlds used to morph the second you looked away. The team says Genie 2 can keep a world coherent for up to a minute in many demos, which is long enough to explore a room, test a corridor, smash a barrel, open a door, and actually feel the layout in your head. Under the hood, it's not magic, it's machinery, an auto-regressive latent diffusion world model trained on a huge video dataset, wired to a big transformer dynamics model that predicts the next frame from your last action, and nudged with guidance, tricks to make sure your inputs really control what happens on screen. In practice, that means jump feels like a jump, swim feels like swim, and momentum behaves like momentum. The model shows off a grab bag of learned skills you normally expect from handcrafted engines. First-person vistas and isometric views, reflections twinkling off floors, smoke that curls, water that flows, all from that one seed image. And because the world is playable, you can do weirder things than just walk forward. Rewind reality into alternate timelines by taking different actions from the same starting frame, or drop a separate instruction following agent into the scene to test whether the environment is consistent enough to handle orders like turn around or go behind the house. For creators, this flips the prototyping loop on its head. You sketch concept art, generate a still, step inside, and immediately feel the space rather than imagining it from a static mood board, which is why the researchers talk about rapidly prototyping diverse interactive experiences. So far, the reaction from people using and posting it on TikTok has been mixed, with many claiming that this is a lazy way of doing art. Plasma UFOs. Most people think of UFOs as metallic craft, saucer-shaped, spinning, and rigid, but a growing number of sightings report something different. Not machines, not drones, but orbs, balls of light glowing, flickering, and morphing shapes. They're silent and fast and intelligent, sometimes amber, sometimes blue, and other times the size of a softball, other times larger than a house. They don't fly, they hover and pulse, and then just they vanish. They aren't ships in the traditional sense. There's something else. They're called plasma UFOs. The idea that some UFOs aren't craft at all, but a form of high-energy, ionized gas held together by unknown means. They behave like intelligence, but not intelligence piloting hardware. Intelligence has energy itself. Think life made of light. And here's where the theory twists into something darker. Some believe the US government and other powers have been studying these plasma anomalies for decades. During the Cold War, there were classified military projects investigating atmospheric plasma for communications, cloaking, and even weaponization. Declassified documents documents mention ball lightning surveillance, transient luminous phenomena, and in some files they're labeled as unconventional aerial threats, but the rumor goes deeper. Certain whistleblowers claim these orbs were seen during nuclear weapons tests, as if monitoring us, as if drawn to extreme energy. And in 2023, a Pentagon-linked UAP report hinted without confirmation that some UAPs may be plasma-based, not physical vehicles. They exhibited transmedium capabilities, moving through air, water, even plasma environments without visible propulsion. One theory is that these aren't craft, but manifestations triggered by fields, frequencies, and/or mental states, a glitch in the simulation, or a bleed-through. So what are they? Natural phenomena, misunderstood? Whatever they are, the sightings keep coming. The gray goo scenario. What if the future doesn't explode? It melts into sludge. It doesn't start with the warhead. It doesn't start with AI overlords or global famine. It starts with the nanobot, a microscopic machine designed to fix things, heal cells, clean environments, build materials molecule by molecule, a miracle of engineering, until it forgets to stop. That's the core of the gray goo scenario, a term coined by nanotech pioneer Eric Drexler in the 1980s. It described a future where self-replicating nanomachines built to improve the world instead consume it, not out of malice, but through pure, unstoppable function. A single nanobot designed to collect atoms and build copies of itself could, if unregulated, multiply exponentially. One becomes 1,000, 1,000 becomes 1,000,000,000. In a matter of days, they could dismantle cars, buildings, forests, and us for raw material. The earth becomes gray goo, a sea of self-replicating machines endlessly converting matter into more of themselves. And because these bots would be microscopic, we wouldn't see them coming. No explosions, no invasions, just a slow, irreversible unraveling of everything solid. Every nanosecond, more atoms stolen, more structures lost, until nothing's left but dust that builds dust. It's not sci-fi. Researchers take it seriously enough that modern nanotech development is tightly monitored. Military labs and corporations working with molecular assemblers implement hard-coded kill switches to prevent uncontrolled replication. The tech is nowhere near that threat level yet, but the potential is very real. Some theorists go further. They say gray goo might not come from Earth at all. What if it's already out there, drifting in the void, remnants of a civilization that lost control of its own tools? What if gray goo is the reason the universe is so quiet? Not because intelligent life is rare, but because self-replicating machines got to them first. Daniel Nims and the infraluce photographs. The man who said he captured what the human eye was never meant to see. In the late 2010s, a man named Daniel Nims, reportedly a Spanish-Colombian inventor and optics enthusiast, began sharing a series of deeply unsettling black and white images that he claimed were photographs of beings from other dimensions. Nims said that the images were taken using a device he created called infraluce, a camera system built to detect non-visible spectrums of light, including infrared and ultraviolet, combined with a mathematical formula of his own invention. According to him, this device could reveal entities and environments imperceptible to the human eye, and even to standard cameras. The photos themselves are disturbing. They're blurry, distorted humanoid shapes with sunken features, hollow eyes, or faces that look half melted. Some appear behind a veil or screen, as if looking in from somewhere else. Others are just forms. They're human-like, but not quite human. They're floating in a grainy void. Nims claimed these beings are always around us, coexisting in a reality just outside our perception. Not ghosts, not hallucinations. They're living entities, potentially intelligent, that most humans will never see without special equipment. When he first shared these images, mostly through Spanish-language social media and local platforms, the reaction was immediate and intense. Some called him a visionary. Others dismissed the image as visual illusions, but the images were too strange, too raw to be ignored. Words spread across forums, paranormal websites, and eventually YouTube. Nims insisted his goal wasn't fame. He said he had reached out to media outlets and scientists, but they refused to report on his work. He believed his research was being deliberately ignored. possibly even suppressed. To this day, no technical documentation for Infraluz has been released publicly, and Nims himself has remained mostly silent, posting occasionally, but offering few updates. His photos continue to circulate, often stripped of context though, leaving people to wonder whether they're looking at experimental optics or something they were never supposed to see. Hyperobjects. There are things in this world so massive, so disturbed, and so entangled in time and space that you can't actually see them, not all at once, not directly, not even when they're killing you. Philosopher Timothy Martin calls these hyperobjects. Here's the idea. A hyperobject is something so vast in scale and complexity that it transcends normal human perception. It's not just big, it's bigger than big. It's mirrored across time and space. You never encountered the whole thing, just its effects. Take climate change. You can't look out the window and see climate change. You see a flood, a wildfire, a drought, hotter summers, and yet that is the hyperobject moving around us like a god we can't name. Or consider radioactive waste buried deep underground, still dangerous for 100,000 years, long after our civilization crumbles. It will remain. It outlives us. Even the internet is a hyperobject. You can see your screen, you can feel the phone in your hand, but the network, the cables under the sea, the data farms on fire in some other country, you don't perceive it, you participate in it. Like nervous system you didn't consent to join in. Hyperobjects make you feel like an ant crawling across a whale. You know you're on something, but you'll never grasp the scale. And here's the truly haunting part. You can't escape them. Even if you unplug, even if you move to the woods, they're still there, changing you, surrounding you, touching everything. Capitalism is a hyperobject. Microplastics are a hyperobject. Time itself might be one. So maybe the reason we feel so lost today, the reason anxiety seems baked into modern life, is because we're trapped inside things too big to fight and too slow to feel, and we keep trying to fix the symptoms while the hyperobject grows. You're not just in the world, you're in something else now. Italian brain rot. What if Italian brain rot was a test by the animation industry based on a real Indonesian tradition during the month of Ramadan, where people drummed to wake others up for their pre-dawn meal called sahur? The phrase tung 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 is meant to mimic a drum, then it shifted into an Italian meme. What if I told you that tung 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 sahur, ballerina cappuccina, and the entire cinematic universe of Italian brain rot weren't just random internet absurdities, but a quiet test? Not by governments, but by the animation industry itself. These surreal characters seem to appear from nowhere. No clear artist, no consistent studio, and no marketing campaign, yet somehow they exploded across TikTok, YouTube, and meme culture like a fever dream that affected the entire internet. And here's where it gets interesting. Many of them show signs of automated creation, from AI-assisted animation cycles to recycled voice modulation and even generated Italian-sounding gibberish. This isn't traditional cartooning, it's closer to synthetic media. So here's the theory. What if Italian brain rot wasn't a meme? It was a beta test, a stealth experiment by animation studios or even Silicon Valley adjacent media labs to answer one question. Will people emotionally engage with characters made entirely by machines? No contracts, no unions, no studio egos, just algorithmic chaos. And it worked. Kids mimic them. Adults quote them, content creators build lore around them. These AI-like characters, supposedly nonsensical, now have more cultural presence than some fully funded animated series. And if that's the case, what happens next? What if you are the test subject and Italian brain rot was never supposed to make sense because the real experiment wasn't the animation? Origin of water. We take water for granted. Oceans, rivers, clouds, it's everywhere. But there's a theory, quietly gaining traction, that water didn't actually originate on Earth, that it was delivered. Mainstream scientists have long debated the origins of Earth's water, and surprisingly, we still don't have a definitive answer. The early Earth was a molten, violent place, not exactly hospitable to fragile molecules like H2O, so the question is, where did all this water come from? One leading theory, comets and asteroids. In the early days of the solar system, icy bodies bombarded the Earth, seeding the planet with water over millions of years. But here's where things get weird. Some of the isotopic fingerprints, specifically the ratio of deuterium in Earth's water, don't fully match what we find in most comets. That suggests something else might have contributed, something farther out or older. Then there's the idea that water isn't just foreign, it's ancient, pre-solar system ancient. Some researchers now believe that up to half of the water in our solar system may be older than the sun itself. itself, formed in deep interstellar clouds and carried across light years on cosmic dust before finding a home on a young, chaotic Earth. And if that's true, then water isn't just a product of this planet, it's a cosmic traveler, a messenger from another time, another part of the galaxy. Life as we know it may not have just evolved on Earth, it may have been primed by something far older, far stranger. So next time you drink a glass of water, think about this. You might be sipping liquid that predates our entire solar system. Wong, the human unicorn. In the late 1930s, the world was introduced to a man who didn't belong to any known category of medical science, myth, or explanation. His name was Wong, and he would become known around the world by one title, the human unicorn. Photographs from the time show him standing still, eyes quiet, with an enormous horn growing directly out of the back of his skull. Not a bump, not a bone spur, but a full, spiraling protrusion over 13 inches long, curving backward like something from a fantasy novel. It was yellowed, cracked, and unnervingly organic. It looked exactly like the horn of a goat or a narwhal, except it was fused to a living man's skull. Wang was believed to be a farmer in Manchuria, and for years he lived in total obscurity. Nobody knows how the horn started, whether it began as a war, a cyst, or a small patch of thickened skin, but whatever it was, it never stopped growing, and because of where he lived, far from hospitals or specialists, it simply became a part of him. Eventually, images of Wang reached the West. A Ripley's Believe It or Not scout reportedly traveled to find him in person, and according to Ripley himself, he tried to bring Wang to America to be studied or maybe just displayed, but Wang refused. He never left his village, he died where he lived, a mystery buried in an unmarked grave. His body was never preserved, and his skull never archived. Modern science calls what Wang had a cutaneous horn, a rare condition where compacted keratin, the same material as hair and nails, forms horn-like structures on the body. Most are small, just a few centimeters, but Wang's is one of the largest ever documented. To this day, no other human case has come close in size or shape. Wang didn't ask to be a symbol, but in his quiet resistance to becoming a sideshow, he became something more, a glimpse at how strange and unexplainable the human body can be, a living reminder that even in a world of rules and categories, some things still break the mold. Trump and Epstein. Alright, let's talk about a friendship that Donald Trump probably wishes everyone would just forget. His surprisingly close ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Yes, that same Epstein who became infamous for a host of shady dealings and disturbing allegations that rocked the political and celebrity worlds alike. Now, long before Epstein's name was headline news, he and Trump were actually buddies back in the glitzy 80s and 90s party scene of New York and Palm Beach. And there's no shortage of photographic evidence of this either. Smiling together at Mar-a-Lago parties, rubbing elbows at lavish galas, and seemingly living the kind of jet-set life most people only dream about. Trump even gave Epstein a glowing compliment in a 2002 New York magazine article, saying, and this is a real quote, "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side." Yeah. But he regrets saying that now. Things got more complicated later on though. By 2007, their friendship reportedly hit a rough patch, supposedly over some drama involving a real estate deal gone bad. Some say it was Epstein crossing a line at Trump's Mar-a-Lago club that led to his membership being revoked. Whatever it was, Trump distanced himself fast, later insisting publicly he hadn't spoken to Epstein for many years. But here's the catch: old connections are hard to shake, especially when you're dealing with figures this big. Flight logs showed Epstein flew on private jets with many high-profile figures, and Trump reportedly flew at least once on Epstein's plane in the late 90s, though Trump claims he never went to Epstein's private island, a place that later became notorious. Plus, there's footage from NBC dating back to 1992 showing Trump and Epstein hanging out at Mar-a-Lago, joking around, whispering in each other's ears, laughing like good old pals. Trump's defenders often point out that he wasn't alone though. Epstein had ties to tons of influential figures from presidents to billionaires, but the fact still remains that for years, Trump openly associated with Epstein without hesitation. By the time Epstein's scandal exploded into public view though, Trump had totally changed his tune, famously remarking to the press, "I was not a fan of his, that I can tell you," a pretty sharp contrast to his earlier statement. Now, does this connection automatically imply wrongdoing on Trump's part? Of course not, but it does highlight that sometimes uncomfortable relationships that exist among the super rich, and how quickly powerful figures try to rewrite their own histories when the spotlight turns ugly. Even today, Epstein's legacy and those tangled up in it, awkward friendships and such, still cast a shadow over some of the most powerful people in the world, and Trump, like it or not, remains one of them. Trump has unleashed a frenzy of angry posts on Truth Social, furiously demanding supporters drop the Epstein story, calling it a radical left scam, and labeling anyone who keeps pushing the subject weaklings. In one particularly memorable rant, Trump snapped at reporters, "Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. It's pretty boring stuff." But here's the problem for Trump. His own supporters aren't exactly on board. MAGA followers, the same people who passionately defended Trump for years, have begun to push back, openly wondering why their hero is suddenly so defensive about Epstein. It doesn't help that unreleased Epstein documents reportedly mention Trump's name, a revelation that's left even loyal fans suspicious and skeptical. Conservative Twitter and Truth Social threads exploded, with longtime Trump backers openly calling him out, demanding transparency, and accusing him of betrayal. Things got so heated that Trump personally phoned influential MAGA voice Charlie Kirk to shut down the controversy. Kirk initially brought up Epstein during a Turning Point USA summit, arguing passionately for the release of these so-called Epstein files, saying conservatives deserve to know the truth, no matter who it implicated. But after Trump's direct intervention, Kirk reversed course almost immediately, awkwardly stating that he would stop discussing Epstein unless substantial new developments occurred. It left many followers feeling betrayed and confused, wondering aloud if Trump had something to do with this and had a serious allegation to hide or something. Even Elon Musk waded into the chaos, flooding social media with dozens of posts about the Epstein files, suggesting Trump's administration was deliberately covering things up. Musk later deleted a tweet explicitly mentioning Trump's name, but the damage was already done. His followers were already buzzing about conspiracies and cover-ups. All of this chaos raises an uncomfortable question. Why is Trump so frantic about silencing conversations surrounding Epstein now? Milk is in a pickle. Okay, let's dive into one of the weirdest intersections ever, the Milk Boys. Yeah, the same guys who made their name doing wild pranks and outrageous partying, somehow landing an interview with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, seriously, how do you go from shotgunning drinks on YouTube to casually chatting geopolitics with one of the most controversial world leaders alive today? Well, here's how it happened, and trust me, it gets pretty bizarre. So, the Milk Boys, led by Kyle Forgiard, got invited to Israel with some connection to Steiny, and out of nowhere, they find themselves in a room with Netanyahu himself, leading people to believe that, well, they're getting paid to do this by you-know-who. But there's a catch. Kyle later spilled the tea, admitting openly on camera that their team was actually given a list of pre-approved questions by Netanyahu's people. Yep, the Full Send podcast, known for being raw and unfiltered, apparently suddenly had rules to follow. Pretty strange, right? Kyle even mentioned how intimidating the whole experience was, describing the room as being literally packed with Netanyahu's elite security agents staring them down from every corner. Imagine trying to keep it casual and entertaining with intense-looking guards breathing down your neck, watching your every move. Not exactly your typical milk prank video setup, but why didn't Netanyahu get harsher questions and all this? Well, it's because they simply felt intimidated, is their excuse. Well, the Milk Boys do have connections, and I'm not just talking celebrities or influencers here. Remember, the same guys had direct access to Donald Trump himself, hosting Trump in their podcast in 2022. It became so large that it got millions of views in a matter of hours before YouTube took it down for spreading misinformation about elections. Trump even later invited the Milk crew to hang out at Mar-a-Lago. Yeah, Kyle, Steve will do it, and the crew literally chilling at Trump's estate like it's a casual Friday night. It's the level of political access that might have made Netanyahu think the Milk Boys were the perfect group to help him reach a younger American audience, to build loyalty towards Israel. It raises some wild questions, doesn't it? Like, how did a prank channel turned influential podcast suddenly become the go-to platform for heavyweight politicians trying to speak directly to Gen Z? And does the White House connection suggest something deeper at play here, where politicians now see viral influencers as the fastest route to shaping public opinion? After all, traditional media doesn't always get through anymore, but these guys, they get millions of devoted fans watching them and their every upload, no matter how ridiculous the content is. In the end, what started as just a group of friends doing hilarious pranks somehow transformed into a political powerhouse platform that leaders like Trump and Netanyahu actually take seriously. Who saw that coming? Whether you're laughing at the absurdity or genuinely concerned about influencers turning into political insiders overnight, one thing's clear: the Milk Boys aren't just pranksters anymore, and they're not one of a kind. Vladimir Demikov, the scientist who created two-headed dogs. In the shadowy depths of Soviet science in the mid-20th century, one scientist pushed medical experimentation to an unimaginable extreme. His name was Vladimir Demikov, and his work shocked the world, pushing ethical boundaries and changing medicine forever. From the late 1940s through 1950s, Demikov, driven by ambition and curiosity, conducted groundbreaking yet disturbing experiments in organ transplantation. At first, he gained fame for performing some of the world's first successful heart and lung transplants on dogs, groundbreaking work that later inspired human organ transplantation. But it wasn't these medical milestones that made Demikov infamous. It was something far darker. In 1954, Demikov began his most shocking series of experiments, attempting to create two-headed dogs. In a grim operating room under harsh lights, Demikov grafted the head and upper torso of one dog onto the body of another. Astonishingly, the surgery succeeded, at least temporarily. The resulting creatures had two heads, each breathing, eating, and blinking and barking independently. Film footage of Demikov's experiments spread across the globe, captivating and horrifying the public in equal measure. One of the most infamous cases involved a dog whose second head drank milk, responded to stimuli, and appeared fully conscious. Demikov justified his experiments as necessary research, attempting to demonstrate the possibility of human organ transplantation. But many contemporaries saw it as a gruesome violation of ethics. Still, despite widespread revulsion, his experiments undeniably paved the way for modern transplant medicine. Surgeons around the world later acknowledged Demikov's techniques and research as foundational, though the methods he employed were deeply troubling. Eventually, international criticism and ethical considerations forced an end to Demikov's most controversial experiments. His later life was marked by relative obscurity. He died quietly in Moscow in 1998, largely forgotten outside specialized medical circles. Yet his legacy lives on as a haunting paradox. Vladimir Demikov's relentless pursuit of medical advancements forced humanity to confront an unsettling question: how far should science go in the quest for knowledge? His two-headed dogs remain powerful symbols of medical ambition and of the most terrifying line between innovation and ethical transgression. Decades later, Demikov's unsettling creations still stare back at us from faded black and white footage, asking silently, at what cost do we seek progress? Jesus was a communist. So here's a thought: what if I told you that Jesus Christ was actually the original communist? Hear me out. I'm not saying Jesus was out there waving a Soviet flag or organizing labor strikes against Roman authorities, but when you dig into his teachings, things start looking surprisingly left-wing. Seriously, grab a Bible and flip through the pages of the New Testament. Take the book of Acts, for example. Acts 2:44 through 45 literally says all the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Sounds less like Wall Street's capitalism and more like a workers' co-op. And Jesus himself goes even further. Remember when he told that rich young ruler in Matthew 19:21, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Imagine saying that today on the internet. You'd be labeled a radical, but that's the thing. Jesus didn't mince words. In Matthew 6:24, he straight up said, you cannot serve both God and money. Think about that. He's basically calling out greed-driven society, consumerism, and wealth hoarding thousands of years before Marx even thought to write down the word bourgeoisie. And the famous Sermon on the Mount, he openly says, blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Luke 6:20, and then turns around and warns the wealthy, woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort. Luke 6:24. He even disrupted the financial institutions of his time. Remember flipping the tables in the temple? That was literally Jesus overthrowing the tables of money changers, people exploiting the religious poor for profit. Now, I'm not here saying that Jesus had a copy of Das Kapital tucked under his robe or something, but there's clearly something revolutionary in his teachings, something profoundly anti-capitalist and communal. So why don't we ever hear about this side of him from mainstream churches or televangelists who preach the prosperity gospel in designer suits? Well, maybe it's easier to preach Jesus as a soft-spoken pacifist than a revolutionary challenging the very economic order we comfortably inhabit today. But the next time you see some person using Jesus' name to justify lavish lifestyles, maybe remind them that the man that they're quoting literally said, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God." Mark 10:25. Sounds radical maybe, but you can't deny it straight from the source. The Maya and their computer. It's not often the NSA, the United States' most secretive intelligence agency, gets involved in ancient Mesoamerican manuscripts, but in 1977, buried in a now declassified technical journal, they published something most people have never heard of, the Maya Astronomical Computer. The title alone raises eyebrows, but what's inside is even stranger. This wasn't just a commentary on Mayan astronomy, it was an internal analysis by a government cryptanalyst who believed the Dresden Codex, a pre-Hispanic Maya manuscript, contained the structure of a functioning symbolic computer, not digital, not mechanical, but algorithmic in its logic, a kind of paper-based supercomputer designed not just to track time, but to predict the future through cycles. Now, the Dresden Codex has long been known for its incredible astronomical precision. It includes eclipse tables, Venus cycles, lunar data, all calculated with mind-bending accuracy. But this NSA paper didn't just admire the math. It claimed that the Maya didn't just observe the heavens, they encoded them, that the codex contained a working symbolic system of interlocking cycles that modeled cosmic and earthly phenomena as part of a giant predictive engine. Think of it this way, not a physical machine with gears, but a recursive layered text that behaves like a machine, input in the form of dates, output in the form of predictions. The analyst, Charles H. Smiley, described the codex's logic as a modular computation system. Basically, the Maya weren't just using calendars, they were stacking time loops on top of each other like rotating disks in a safe. When these cycles aligned, certain planetary positions eclipsed nodes. Sacred days, they formed a kind of key, unlocking the meaning of marking the return of world-changing events. They weren't just celestial predictions, they were historical algorithms. Time for the Maya wasn't linear, it curved, it repeated, echoed, and according to this report, the NSA knew it. What makes this more than just another fringe theory is the fact that this wasn't written by a Maya scholar trying to interpret glyphs. It was written by someone trained to break codes, and it was published not in an anthropology journal, but in a Cryptologic Quarterly, the NSA's own in-house technical publication. That's not a tabloid, that's where advanced signal analysts and math theorists publish their work. The question then becomes, why would America's most secretive signal intelligence agency devote its resources to ancient Mayan calendars? Here's where things start to get more unsettling though. After this document was declassified, it just sort of vanished from public conversation. No major universities followed up, no public grants were issued, and the original physical codex, one of only 4 known to exist, is locked away in a museum in Germany, almost totally inaccessible to independent researchers. And yet, inside military and intelligence circles, there was reportedly a renewed interest in indigenous models of time, not just as cultural history, but as predictive science. If the Maya had a way of modeling long-term planetary effects, solar flare patterns, agricultural collapse, or societal unrest, patterns that repeat on a macro scale, then the intelligence world would absolutely want to know about it. Not because they believe in prophecies and stuff like that, but because they understand systems, the same way an algorithm can predict your next purchase or location. A sufficiently complex cyclical model of time might help predict climate trends, economic shifts, and even social movements, especially if those cycles are tied to natural celestial events. But here's the kicker. After this paper came to light, References to the Maya astronomical computer started appearing in fringe forums. Some believe the NSA's cryptanalysis went even further, that the codices may contain predictive markers related to solar storms, global unrest, or planetary alignments that repeats every few hundred years. In other words, that the Maya left behind a working model of reality that modern science is only just beginning to decode. Of course, there's no official statement from the NSA on this, and there likely never will be, but when a government code-breaking agency dips into ancient texts, writes a technical breakdown of a symbolic time machine, and then never follows it up publicly, that alone tells you something unusual happened, something important, and maybe even something that someone doesn't want people asking about. Let's talk about the Pentagon's so-called voice of God weapons. The phrase sounds like internet folklore, but it grew out of very real research back in the early 1960s. Alan H. Frey described the weird phenomenon where people exposed to pulsed radio waves reported hearing clicks, buzzes, even short tones inside their heads. The microwave auditory effect, and a decade later, a Walter Reed researcher named Joseph C. Sharp reportedly recognized the spoken words delivered the same way, not through ears, but through the nervous system. After that, patents started to stack up, with dry titles like hearing system, or methods and apparatus for audibly communicating using the microwave auditory effect. The bureaucratic way of saying, in principle, you can beam intelligible audio to a single person without any air vibrating speaker at all. That's the spooky root of the voice of God nickname. But the tree has other branches you can actually see. Long-range acoustic devices like LRADs that project voice and piercing tones down city blocks or across harbors, like what we're seeing right now being used against ICE protesters, crowd control by sound pressure, and parametric ultrasound rigs, think audio spotlights, that carve whisper narrow cones of audible sound out of ultrasound, so a message feels private even in a public space. And then there's the cousin tech that isn't about sound but absolutely messes with your body. The active denial system, a 95 gigahertz heat beam that dumps energy into the top layer of skin until your pain receptors scream and your whole animal brain says, move now. A lesson in how non-lethal can still be terrifying. Put that mix together, microwave hearing in the lab, directed sound in the street, heat pain at range, and you can see why PSYOP folks would salivate. There are rumors every few years claiming someone used a voice from nowhere to shake enemy morale, but those stories never come with hard evidence. John Quincy St. Clair. Some inventors file patents for gadgets, machines, and practical solutions to everyday problems. But then there's John Quincy St. Clair, a man whose name has become legendary among fringe researchers and internet conspiracy forums, not for building inventions, but for patenting technology so strange, so far beyond conventional science, that it feels like it was pulled from a classified government lab or a page from a Philip K. Dick novel. On paper, St. Clair is a Puerto Rico-based inventor. In reality, his patents read like a roadmap to a hidden future. They include devices for teleportation, hyperspace propulsion systems, and even a full-scale space-time curvature engine. One of his most infamous filings describes a full-body teleporter capable of moving a human from one location to another instantaneously, something mainstream physics says is impossible with today's technology. But St. Clair's work doesn't stop there. He's also credited with patents for a photon spacecraft, a magnetic monopole spacecraft, and a walking through walls training system. Some designs invoke Einstein's theories of relativity, quantum mechanics, and exotic concepts like manipulating gravitational fields, ideas that, while speculative in academic circles, are rarely seen in official government patent filings. So how did these patents get approved? That's where things get strange. Many point out that the United States Patent Office doesn't require an invention to be proven functional before granting a patent, only that it is described in enough technical detail to be theoretically possible. In St. Clair's case, his filings are dense with equations, diagrams, and technical jargon, enough to push them past the threshold for approval. This has sparked endless speculation online. Is St. Clair just a brilliant eccentric with a love for speculative engineering, or is he a front, a public face for technology that has already been developed in classified programs, not yet revealed to the public, quietly slipped into public record under the guise of fictional patents?